You've likely asked it before, perhaps late at night, when the hum of daily noise finally fades. Why are we here? Not where, or how, or what we're made of, but why? And not the biological answer: reproduction, adaptation, survival. That answer belongs to the body, not the mind. This question is older than science. It's been whispered across candlelit parchment, murmured beneath cathedral ceilings, etched into stone tablets, and passed down in myths sung over flickering fires. It's not new, and still, it isn't solved. Imagine yourself in an early settlement, thousands of years ago, a small village hemmed in by forest and sky. The people here know the rhythms of seasons better than numbers. They hunt, gather, plant. They survive. But survival doesn't explain the rituals. The burial sites arranged toward the stars, the carved figurines placed beside the dead, the sky painted on cave ceilings, sun, moon, animals, motion. None of it is necessary, not for food, not for warmth, but they did it anyway. Now, step forward. Ancient Egypt. The workers who pulled stone beneath the desert sun didn't do it just for wages, or even for kings. They were building homes for the afterlife, long, echoing tunnels designed not for human eyes, but for a soul's journey. Their purpose was stretched beyond life, and perhaps that too is part of the answer. Centuries later, philosophers in Athens walk under olive trees. Socrates wonders aloud if the soul existed before the body. Plotinus speaks of the One, an ultimate source beyond form. And even now, these ideas drift, reshaped, reworded, but never resolved. We still don't know. Maybe we never will. Maybe that is the point. Some questions are not puzzles to be solved, but paths we walk again and again, each generation leaving faint footprints behind. And in that walking, perhaps, is the answer, not fixed, but unfolding. Imagine lying still, eyes closed, yet utterly aware. You hear distant traffic. You feel the warmth of your blanket. You recall a memory so vividly it makes your chest tighten. But none of these things are physical. Not the sound, not the warmth, not the memory. What then are they made of? Science can map the folds of your brain, measure the firing of neurons, and name the chemicals coursing through your synapses. But it cannot explain the color red as you see it, or the sting of nostalgia as you feel it. These are qualia, the raw textures of inner life, private, invisible, and unmeasurable. Centuries ago, philosophers like Descartes imagined a divide: res extensa, the world of matter, and res cogitans, the realm of thought. Two substances, impossibly joined. Today, neuroscience traces behavior to biology, yet the essence of awareness slips through every scan. You can observe a pain signal, but pain itself, that is lived, not located. Consider dreams, entire landscapes conjured without light, built from silence. Where does the sky in a dream come from? The trees? The voice of someone long gone? No retina received them, no air carried sound. Yet they arrive, vivid and persistent. Some theories suggest consciousness is an emergent property, like wetness from water. Others imagine it as fundamental, as real as gravity, but unrecognized. Panpsychists whisper that even atoms might have awareness, faint and fragmented. And still, despite libraries of thought, no one knows how the mind arises from matter. You are told your brain generates you, but perhaps, quietly, the opposite is true. So tonight, as thoughts drift like mist and sleep draws near, remember, you're not just inside consciousness. You are it, whatever it is. Imagine yourself standing in an old courtyard just before dawn. The air is cool and still. The first light hasn't yet broken the horizon. A faint breeze drifts through cracked stones and moss-lined walls. You listen, not for anything specific, just to hear how stillness sounds. This moment feels quiet, stretched, but is it long or short? Are you early or late? Without a clock, what is this moment made of? We talk about time like it's a thing, an arrow, a river, a ticking presence that moves forward. But that idea is newer than it feels. Ancient civilizations marked time by the sun's shadow, the drip of water, the changing of seasons. But these were measurements of change, not of time itself. No one could hold time. They could only watch what changed and invent numbers to describe it. Now step quietly into a lab in the early 20th century. Einstein is scribbling across a blackboard, reshaping reality. In his theory of relativity, time is not a universal constant. It bends, it stretches, it slows down beside heavy masses, speeds up in empty space. Time becomes part of space-time, a flexible geometry, not a ticking clock. In that view, time doesn't flow. It just is, like space, but unseen. And here's where it gets more peculiar. The laws of physics, almost all of them, don't care which direction time moves. Forward or backward, the math works either way. It's only us, with our memories and aging bodies, who seem to move one way. So, is time truly passing? Or are we simply climbing through still frames of a fixed reality, one perception at a time? Even the brain measures time through patterns, neural rhythms, flickers of sensation. You don't see time, you experience intervals, waiting for water to boil, walking home in the rain, listening to someone pause before they speak. Time isn't a thing. It's the structure your awareness uses to stay oriented. So tonight, as you lie still and breathe slowly, consider the possibility. Time may not be something that flows through you, but something that emerges from you. A gentle illusion, a rhythm you hum to keep from getting lost. Imagine yourself before memory, before breath, before even the womb. Not asleep, not waiting, simply not. You didn't feel time pass, didn't hear silence, because you weren't there to notice. And yet, here you are. What happened in between? Philosophers have long asked, were you nothing, or were you something beyond memory? Some ancient traditions say the soul drifts between lives, wearing new bodies like clothes. Others say consciousness is born fresh, never before, never again. But science offers no memory of your beginning, just cells dividing, a body forming. No self yet, only motion. Still, something strange lingers. You don't remember being nothing, but you feel like you came from somewhere, as if your arrival wasn't random, but summoned. Why this place, this time, this body? Why do you feel so rooted, as if existence didn't start you, but revealed you? Maybe that's the paradox. You fear death, but not the time before birth. Both are made of the same silence, and still, one terrifies you, while the other feels like a mystery already solved. So ask yourself gently, as sleep draws near, did you really come from nothing? Or are you only forgetting the part that came before? Imagine yourself sitting in quiet stillness. A thought arises, unbidden, effortless, then fades. Another follows. You notice it. You observe its shape, its weight, its emotional temperature. But if you can watch your thoughts, who is it that's doing the watching? Philosophers from many traditions have traced this strange loop. In ancient India, the Upanishads spoke of the Atman, the silent witness behind all experience, never touched by emotion or action, yet aware of both. Centuries later, Descartes would distill this sensation into a single line, I think, therefore I am. But what if the act of thinking isn't the proof of self, but the very veil that hides it? In your daily life, you may notice yourself feeling sad or distracted, or even lost in memory. That you who notices, who gently says, this is not me, only a passing state, feels somehow deeper, more stable. This is what psychologists sometimes call meta-awareness, awareness of awareness itself. But even here, something odd remains. If you can observe your awareness, what is it that observes the observer? Some meditation traditions teach that the answer is not another layer, but the quiet collapse of layers. That the more deeply you look for the watcher, the more it dissolves into spaciousness. No final you is found, only a field of attention, like a mirror with no edge, endlessly reflecting. Neuroscience, too, struggles here. The brain produces consciousness, but where exactly is the self located? Split brain studies show that what we call identity can divide. Patients with surgically separated hemispheres seem to house two competing observers, both answering questions independently. If the observer can fracture, then was it ever truly whole? So you return to stillness. Another thought arises. You observe it. But now you also feel the mystery observing you observing it, like standing between two mirrors, each reflecting back a reflection that never reaches a final image. There is no center, only the endless echo of presence, quiet, ungraspable, and strangely familiar. You've felt it, haven't you? That quiet flicker, a room you've never seen, yet somehow recognize, a conversation you swear you've had before, a path your feet seem to know without guidance. Déjà vu, a small, strange shiver in the fabric of experience. Some call it coincidence, others call it a glitch, but in quieter traditions, older ones, it's something else entirely. A whisper from a life lived long ago. Imagine yourself standing on a worn stone threshold, the kind shaped by centuries of footsteps. You've never been here before, not in memory, but something in you relaxes, as if returning, as if remembering what your conscious mind forgot. In many cultures, this feeling isn't dismissed, it's honored. In the temples of India, in the scrolls of Tibet, in quiet corners of ancient Greek philosophy, the idea of the soul returning is not fantasy. It is foundation. Children, barely able to write their own names, have sometimes recited details of lives they've never lived, names of strangers, maps of cities they've never seen. Some forget. Others carry fragments like scattered pages from another story. These stories don't prove anything, but they persist across continents, across eras. The idea that we are not just one life, but a series of echoes. Of course, memory is fragile, and time is slippery. It's possible we simply dream more than we realize, that the brain, in its quiet processing, creates illusions of return. But still, there are moments when instinct overrides logic, when you know what comes next, without knowing how. Maybe it's a trick, or maybe, just maybe, it's a trace of something older, something yours. Something left behind, not in the world, but within you. Waiting to be felt, not understood. And perhaps that, too, is a kind of remembering. Imagine yourself in a quiet room. No mirrors, no name tags, no expectations. You are not being watched, and there is no one to impress. In this silence, ask yourself, who are you without your roles? You have a name, but you didn't choose it. A gender, perhaps. Assigned before you spoke your first word, a profession, a nationality, a list of preferences and dislikes, all woven into a character sheet written mostly by others. You wear these like layers, like clothing. But are they you? From childhood, you were taught to answer to labels: student, daughter, son, artist, introvert, reliable, difficult. Each word carved into your sense of self, forming an identity like a uniform worn so long it feels like skin. But peel them away, one by one. What's underneath? Memory tells you stories about who you've been. But memory is selective. It edits. It forgets. It reshapes. Even your sense of I may be little more than a stitched narrative, held together by routine and reinforced by repetition. Some ancient traditions spoke of this as Maya, illusion. Not lies, exactly, but masks. Temporary faces worn by something deeper, wordless, and impossible to name. In certain meditations, practitioners describe a strange moment when all self-descriptions fall away. No thoughts, no past, just presence, stillness. It isn't emptiness. It isn't even peace. It's simply you, not as an idea, not as a story, but as awareness itself. So what remains when every label is gone? When you are not your name, your face, your thoughts, or even your memories? That question has no answer. Or perhaps, you are the answer, quietly unfolding in the dark, long after the roles have fallen silent. Imagine yourself in a quiet room, not dark, not bright, just still. The kind of stillness where even your thoughts soften. There is no sound but your own breath, and even that seems distant now. Time doesn't press forward here. It's as though you've stepped out of it into something slower, weightless, a pause that stretches in every direction. Throughout history, cultures have tried to name what follows death: rebirth, nothingness, judgment, reunion. Some see a tunnel of light, others speak of ancestors waiting. But beyond all stories is the one certainty: no one returns unchanged, and some never return at all. From a biological view, death is simple. The heart slows, cells starve, neurons flicker out, but the experience of dying, if there is one, remains hidden behind a veil that memory can't cross. Some who've come close describe floating, seeing themselves from above, feeling peace or disconnection. Yet neuroscience suggests these may be brain responses, electrical misfires in oxygen-starved minds. Still, even science can't fully explain why those moments feel more real than waking life. Now, consider this. Consciousness itself may not be a switch, but a fading gradient, a slow dissolving of boundaries. The self doesn't vanish all at once. It drifts, out of memory, out of form, perhaps into something unrecognizable. In quantum theories, information cannot be destroyed. Does that mean some trace of you persists, encoded into the fabric of reality, like a ripple that never fully stops? Others propose something stranger. That consciousness is not inside the body at all, but accessed through it, like a radio tuning a frequency. If so, death might not be the end of you, but the loss of a receiver. What remains could be untethered awareness, or the closing of a loop you never knew you were inside. You don't need to believe or disbelieve tonight. Just rest inside the question. Let it hold you. A soft hum in the silence, where the answer is not words, but the space they leave behind. Your skin sheds, your bones renew. Even your brain, thought to be the anchor of self, rewires itself over time. They say nearly every atom in your body is replaced every 7 years. And yet, you still feel like you. The same eye looking through your eyes, even as the eyes themselves are not the ones you were born with. If your body is in constant flux, what is it that persists? Ancient philosophers wrestled with this puzzle. The ship of Theseus asked, if every plank of a ship is replaced, is it still the same ship? Neuroscientists today ask a quieter version. If your body regenerates, but your memories feel continuous, does that create the illusion of self? But even memory is unreliable. You forget. You misremember. Sometimes your own past feels like someone else's dream. So then, what is the constant? Perhaps it's not your body, not your memories. Maybe it's the sensation of awareness itself, the quiet presence behind your thoughts, the part that observes the change but never feels changed. You say I without hesitation. But who is speaking? And if every part of you is new, yet you still feel old wounds and childhood joys, then perhaps identity isn't built from what stays, but from the rhythm of what keeps returning. So tonight, as your body rests, ask gently, if you aren't your body, then who keeps showing up inside it? Imagine yourself alone with your mind. No screens, no voices, just silence thick enough to hear your own thoughts taking shape. One whispers reassurance. Another counters with doubt. A memory rises uninvited, colored by a feeling you didn't expect. You notice the inconsistency and begin to wonder, can these thoughts be trusted? Thought often wears the mask of truth. It speaks with the tone of certainty, even when it contradicts itself. One day, it urges action. The next, it whispers hesitation. We assume this mental chatter belongs to us, reflects us, is us. But history, culture, and conditioning leave deep imprints. Language itself limits the shape of thought. What we cannot name, we often cannot think. Across time, many traditions have warned against mistaking thought for truth. The Stoics observed that opinions, not events, cause suffering. In Buddhism, thoughts are likened to clouds passing across the sky, not false, but impermanent, not to be grasped. In modern psychology, cognitive distortions, like catastrophizing or mind reading, reveal just how easily thought can mislead, especially when emotion seeps in quietly underneath. Even memory, which feels solid, bends with mood, repetition, and suggestion. Studies show we can recall entire scenes that never happened, complete with detail and emotion. And yet these memories guide decisions, build relationships, shape identity. So, which thoughts are really yours? The spontaneous ones, the practiced ones, the ones that echo a parent's voice or a stranger's opinion you absorbed without noticing. There's no easy boundary between thought and influence. Some arrive like instincts, others like intrusions. But somewhere behind the noise is a quiet capacity to notice, to question, to pause. In that pause, trust isn't given blindly. It's earned slowly, not by the thought itself, but by the awareness that holds it gently, watches it rise, and lets it go. You make a choice, or so it seems. Tea or coffee, left or right, speak or stay silent. Each decision feels like a moment of freedom, of self. But if you slow it down, quiet the noise, and look more closely, where did that choice come from? Was it truly yours? Or was it already forming before you noticed it? Imagine yourself reaching for a cup on a table. You believe you decided to move your hand, but studies in neuroscience show that your brain had already initiated the motion before you became conscious of it. The signal to move was sent before you chose, as if the self only witnesses decisions, not creates them. A delay, a shadow-chasing motion, not leading it. This isn't new. In the 1600s, Baruch Spinoza wrote that people feel free because they are ignorant of the causes behind their actions. And centuries later, modern biology offers a mirror, chemical signals, neural pathways, and subconscious impulses that fire faster than thought. You think you choose to fall in love, or walk away, or begin again. But how much of that is memory? Hormone? Pattern? Still, something resists this idea. You feel your choices, you regret them, celebrate them. You craft identity from the decisions you've made. But what if free will is not absolute freedom, but a narrow path carved by biology, by culture, by experience, a corridor of options, not a field? And yet, even if we are shaped by forces unseen, even if the choices are guided before we're aware, perhaps meaning comes not from control, but from awareness. The act of watching, reflecting, redirecting, not breaking free of the pattern but gently bending its shape. Maybe that, in the end, is the closest thing to freedom we'll ever know. Sometimes, in the stillness between thoughts, there's a feeling you can't quite name, as if something is aware of you, not in the way cameras are, or strangers in a crowd, but deeper, older, as though your every breath has always been seen, not by governments, not by technology, but by something else. Throughout history, people have whispered of watchers, spirits, angels, judges, recorders. From the Book of Life to the Akashic Records, many traditions speak of an unseen archive, one that collects not just what we do, but what we feel. Every sorrow unspoken, every kindness unnoticed, as if the invisible world keeps its own silent ledger. Science doesn't recognize these things. There's no peer-reviewed proof of eyes behind the sky. But still, why does the air feel heavier after a decision you regret? Why does joy feel brighter when shared aloud, even in solitude? Why does it feel sometimes like your life is being witnessed, even when you're alone? Some theorists wonder, what if consciousness isn't private? What if the field of awareness is shared, more like a broadcast than a sealed room? Perhaps your thoughts ripple outward, observed not by eyes, but by something wordless, something that listens not for punishment or praise, but for understanding. And maybe that's the reason some memories linger, not because you remember them, but because something else does. A presence without form, a quiet audience, not hostile, not helpful, just present. So tonight, if the air feels still and your thoughts turn inward, pause, not to fear being watched, but to wonder if being witnessed is the point. That your story, with all its fractures and light, matters, because it is seen, even if never explained. Imagine yourself walking a long road at dusk. There's no sign of where you began and no clear destination ahead, just a steady rhythm of steps, a sky turning darker, and a faint sense that someone is watching, not with malice, not with care, but with purpose. You don't know the rules, only that certain choices feel weighted, like they matter more than you'll ever be told. Across cultures and centuries, the idea recurs, life as a test, not just a span of time, but a proving ground. Ancient scriptures speak of trials, temptations, karmic debts. Philosophers describe life as a kind of curriculum, lessons written in loss, in love, in repetition. We stumble, fall, rise, we ask, why? And the answers never come with certainty, just silence and the next challenge. But who or what sets the test? If there's a designer, they remain hidden. If it's random, the test becomes stranger still. In some theories, the universe isn't built for us, but we are built to interpret it as if it is. Pattern-seeking minds assign meaning to chaos. That heartbreak must have been a lesson. That illness, a warning. That success, a reward. Psychologists call this the narrative impulse, the need to believe events form a coherent story, that suffering has meaning, that we're being shaped, not just battered. And maybe it's not a lie. Maybe the test isn't external. Maybe it's not about pleasing a higher power. Maybe it's how you respond when no one's keeping score, how you choose in the quiet, with no reward, no punishment, just the echo of your own awareness. Or perhaps this test is recursive. You set it yourself before you even arrived. Some spiritual traditions suggest you chose this life, its shape, its struggles, as a way to evolve something deeper than memory. That everything you fear, everything you overcome, is not for judgment, but for remembering who you really are beneath the forgetting. So tonight, let yourself wonder, not to solve the question, but to rest inside it. If this is a test, then perhaps the only failing is to stop asking why. You've felt it, even if you couldn't name it. The moon hanging low in a quiet sky, bright, full, distant, and yet it feels close, closer than stars, closer than clouds, as if it knows something you've forgotten. Its gravity pulls oceans. Tides rise and fall with its silent rhythm. Water obeys it. But so, perhaps, do you. After all, your body is mostly water. Some wonder if the same forces that shape the sea stir something softer inside us. For centuries, people have tied the moon to mood. The word lunatic comes from luna, the old belief that full moons disturb the mind. Even now, hospitals and police notice quiet spikes in activity when the moon is full. Coincidence? Or something we still don't understand? You can't feel the pull, but you notice the restlessness. Dreams seem deeper. Thoughts drift wider. A certain longing creeps in like moonlight through curtains. Not painful, just unnameable. Maybe it's not just gravity. Maybe it's rhythm. The moon teaches the world to move in cycles, light to dark, stillness to tide. And in those quiet patterns, something in you finds reflection. Not control, exactly. More like companionship. So when the moon rises and something in you stirs, don't dismiss it. The ocean answers to it. Maybe part of you always did too. There's a kind of feeling that doesn't arrive with clear reason or shape. It drifts in like mist, faint, familiar, and quietly aching. You might notice it while staring out a window, or in the pause between tasks, or when hearing a song that feels older than your memory. A subtle pull towards something, but you don't know what. This is longing, and it doesn't ask to be understood. It simply stays. Longing is not quite desire. Desire seeks an object, a person, a place, a future. But longing is softer, more spacious. It doesn't always want something. It misses something, even if that something never existed. Ancient philosophers described this sensation as a soul's homesickness. Plato imagined it as a dim echo from the world of forms, a place of perfect truth our souls once knew but can no longer touch. Psychologists have tried to map this terrain too. Some call it an existential signal, a gentle alarm that something essential feels out of reach. But what? Love? Meaning? Completion? The object of longing is often less important than its direction, a leaning toward wholeness, like a compass needle that never stops pointing, even if the destination remains hidden. In early childhood, we attach deeply, and from those first bonds, we carry the trace of absence. That absence doesn't always vanish with time, it transforms. A missing friend, a lost home, a future that never came, all can layer into this strange ache. Yet even without loss, people feel it. A quiet yearning for a place they've never seen, for a self they've never been. Some believe this is a spiritual longing, a call from where we came or where we still belong. Others see it as simply the cost of being conscious, to know there is more than what we can touch, and to feel that absence as vividly as presence. And so it lingers, not to be solved, but to be noticed. A reminder that something in you is always reaching, not outward, but inward, toward something nameless, timeless, and quietly waiting. You've felt it before, a swell in your chest, a quiet ache in the presence of something beautiful, a certain light in the sky, a single note in a melody, a face, a painting. And though there's no pain in it, no danger, your eyes fill, your breath catches. It hurts, somehow, but gently. And you wonder, why? Imagine yourself alone, watching the sun dip below the edge of the sea. The colors bleed across the sky like a memory you never lived. No one speaks, nothing moves, and still, something inside you shifts. Beauty in that moment is not just what you see, it's what it awakens, something older than words. Philosophers have struggled with this sensation for centuries. The ancient Greeks believed beauty was harmony, a glimpse of divine order. In the 18th century, German thinkers like Schopenhauer and Kant wrote of beauty as a rare moment when desire is suspended, or when we stop wanting and simply witness. But that still doesn't explain the ache. One theory is this: beauty hurts because it reminds us of what's fleeting. A song ends, a sunset fades, a face changes. In those moments, we are confronted not just with what is beautiful, but with the fact that we cannot keep it. It is the gentle tragedy of being alive and knowing that everything passes. Another idea reaches deeper, that beauty isn't just external, it's recognition, a reflection of something we already carry. Noticing beauty, then, is a kind of remembering, of something lost, or something we long for. It touches the part of us that dreams, that hopes, that mourns without knowing what was taken. So when a song brings tears, when a painting leaves you silent, it may not be sadness. It may be your soul briefly recognizing itself, in color, in sound, in light. And perhaps that ache is just the echo of meaning, calling softly through the veil. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine a stranger, far away, someone you'll never meet. Different language, different history, and yet, if they cry, something in you understands. If they laugh, something softens. How is that possible? Is it DNA? Shared biology passed down through the long corridors of evolution? We are, after all, made of the same elements: carbon, calcium, water. We all blink, breathe, bleed. But biology only explains structure, not the sudden ache you feel when a story, not your own, breaks your heart. Some say it's empathy, an emotional resonance like instruments tuned to the same key. When one hums, another vibrates. But empathy, too, has limits. It fades across distance. It weakens with time. And still, you remember. You carry echoes that don't quite belong to you. Is memory the thread, then? A collective one, perhaps, woven from ancestral fragments, passed not in words, but in instinct. A fear of fire, a longing for safety, a tenderness toward lullabies, as if we've all dreamed the same dreams in different skins. But there's another possibility, one older than science or philosophy, that beneath all the names and faces and histories, there is something shared, not learned, not earned, just there, a field, a presence, a silence so deep it joins every voice that ever was. Some call it soul, others call it source, or consciousness itself, unbroken, only appearing divided. So the next time you pass someone on the street, or feel a sudden warmth for no reason at all, maybe it's not random, maybe it's recognition, not of the person, but of the thread. The same thread that moves in all of us, quiet, ancient, and impossibly familiar. Imagine yourself lying in a quiet room. The lamp is off. The sounds of the day have faded. Your breath slows, your body softens, and without permission, the world begins to dissolve. Suddenly, you're elsewhere, a hallway with too many doors, a version of your childhood home that feels familiar and wrong. A stranger's voice speaks your name. You're dreaming, but it doesn't feel fake. It feels realer than anything you left behind. For most of history, dreams were seen as messages from gods, from ancestors, from the soul. In ancient Egypt, priests interpreted dreams as divine instruction. The Greeks built temples where seekers would sleep to receive visions. Even today, some believe dreams are prophetic, warnings, guides, fragments of futures not yet lived. Science sees it differently. In modern psychology, dreams are said to be memory sorting, emotional processing, the brain's quiet maintenance. During REM sleep, your mind sifts through the day's debris, storing, discarding, reorganizing. But why the surreal landscapes? The sudden fear? The impossible physics and people who've long passed? Some neuroscientists suggest dreams are your brain's way of simulating problems, testing outcomes in a safe arena. Others think dreams are random byproducts of neural activity, static the brain desperately tries to make sense of, yet even randomness carries symbols, repetition, familiar faces, hidden griefs. Now, step back further. Some theories propose consciousness itself is layered, and dreams let you touch the deeper strata. Not just memories, but the architecture of your identity. Emotions that can't speak in daylight emerge as symbols at night. And in that space, timeless, rootless, you meet parts of yourself you didn't know you'd hidden. Or maybe, dreams are echoes, not of your mind, but of something larger. A shared field, a collective memory, a different kind of space where thought detaches from logic and reveals what can't be spoken. A doorway, not a product. Not what the brain makes, but what it receives. So as you drift tonight, don't rush to understand what you see. Just follow. Gently, let the landscape change. Let the strange make itself known. Your dream isn't asking you to solve it, only to listen. Your life feels personal, but have you ever noticed its strange symmetry? A chance meeting just when you needed it. A failure that led to the exact place you now call home. As if someone, or something, is threading events together with quiet intention. Stories have structure, beginnings, turning points, resolutions. And when you look back, your life seems to echo that rhythm. Not every moment, but the ones you remember most. The scenes you replay, the lessons that arrived just after the mistake. Some say that's just memory, a trick of the mind shaping chaos into pattern. Others believe there is a design, but it's written by something deeper. Fate, maybe. Karma, or even a version of you outside of time, nudging your steps like an unseen author. Religions, too, whisper of divine scripts. The idea that your story was known before it began, and that free will and destiny somehow walk side by side. But if your path is written, who is writing it? And if no one is, then why does it feel so much like a plot? With recurring themes, unfinished chapters, characters who return, and endings that feel strangely complete. Maybe the story isn't about control. Maybe it's about attention. how you notice certain threads, ignore others, and in doing so, weave meaning. So tonight, as your mind wanders backward, listen to the echoes. What if you're not just living a life, but quietly turning the pages of something already unfolding? You open your eyes. The room returns. The light through the curtain. The weight of your body. You call this waking. But what makes this state more real than the one you just left? Dreams often dissolve the moment you stir, but while inside them, you rarely question their logic. You feel, you act, you believe. So what separates waking life from sleep, other than the agreement we place upon it? Across cultures and centuries, this question has echoed. In ancient China, the philosopher Zhuangzi dreamt he was a butterfly. When he awoke, he wondered, was he a man who dreamt he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming he was a man? The boundary between dreaming and waking, he realized, is not as solid as it seems. Modern neuroscience agrees, at least in part. The brain during REM sleep is remarkably active. It simulates sensory experience without input. It creates entire worlds. And when you wake, your brain continues constructing reality, not from raw truth, but filtered perception, memory, and expectation. Your waking world is not a direct feed. It's a model, assembled second by second. Now add technology, augmented reality, filters, screens, narratives fed by algorithms. What part of your day isn't at least partially curated, simulated, or edited, and yet you feel awake, aware, anchored? But perhaps that sense of waking is just another layer, a comforting illusion to make the dream seem real. Some spiritual paths speak of true awakening, not from sleep, but from illusion. They describe ordinary life as a kind of trance, habits, roles, assumptions repeated so automatically we mistake them for identity. To wake up in this sense isn't to leave the bed, it's to notice the patterns you never questioned, to feel a stillness behind thought, a silence behind sound. So, do we ever truly wake up? Or do we pass through nested dreams calling each one real because it's the one we're inside now? Perhaps awakening isn't a single moment, but a direction. A gentle peeling away of veils, one dream at a time. You sit in stillness. The room is quiet. Nothing presses. Nothing pulls. And yet, your thoughts drift. To a conversation from last week. To an imagined tomorrow. To something you forgot, or fear, or wish for. The moment is safe, even calm, but your mind slips away as if the present cannot hold you for long. Why is that? Imagine yourself in a quiet field. No sound but the wind, no motion but the grass. You tell yourself to be present, to feel your breath, to listen. And for a few seconds, you do. But soon, images arise, memories, plans, regrets. It feels uninvited, automatic, almost like breathing. Evolution may offer a clue. Our ancestors couldn't afford to rest entirely in the present. They survived by anticipating threats, remembering patterns, solving problems before they appeared. A wandering mind was not a flaw, it was a tool. One that asked constantly, what if? What next? But even in peace it persists. Not because you're broken, but because you are human. The mind, shaped over millennia, is always scanning for meaning. The present, though real, is often quiet. It lacks conclusion. It doesn't tell a story. And so the brain begins to write one, pulling from past and future to make the moment feel complete. Some traditions teach us to anchor in the now, to breathe, to observe. But even then, the mind may drift, not from failure, but from its nature. Presence is not a cage, it's a rhythm. You return, then wander, then return again, like a tide that touches the shore then pulls back to the sea. Perhaps the present is not a place we stay, but a place we visit. A pause, a reminder, a breath between thoughts, not incomplete, just not meant to be held too tightly. And maybe that's enough. Not your first thought, not the first humans, but the first ever. The original flicker of awareness in a reality that had never been observed. No stars, no names, no time yet, as we understand it. Just the quiet before anything knew it was quiet. What was it? Did it ask a question? Or was it the question itself? Perhaps it wasn't words at all. Maybe it was sensation, curiosity without form. A presence, realizing it was present. The first tremor of I am, even before I had meaning. No language, no image, only the soft beginning of noticing. Some imagine it as a cosmic mind, a singular field rippling for the first time. Not a god, not a being, but a moment when existence bent inward and saw itself. And in that instant, thought was born, not about something, but of something. Maybe it didn't want, maybe it simply was, or maybe it longed to know, to split, to multiply, to see what else could happen if this fragile thread of awareness unfurled. From that one thought, others tumbled forward. Difference, contrast, form, light, matter, self, and the illusion of separation. Some say the universe began with a bang, others with a breath, but perhaps before either, there was simply a gaze turned inward, then outward, creating space by the very act of wondering. And so, that first thought may still echo through us. In every newborn's first look, in every quiet moment between words, a distant memory of when awareness blinked awake for the first time and asked, not aloud, but through becoming, "What is this?" And everything since has been the answer. Imagine yourself sitting by a window in a quiet house. The light is soft, filtered through old glass. On the table beside you rests an ordinary object, maybe a key, a pebble, or a scrap of paper. To someone else, it's nothing. But to you, it holds weight, a memory, a feeling, a piece of someone you once were. You can't explain it easily, but you don't need to. The object means something, and that's enough. Human beings collect meaning like birds gather twigs, instinctively, persistently, often without knowing why. We assign it to songs, to seasons, to glances that last only a second. We mark anniversaries not just by time, but by emotion. We remember the exact smell of a place we lost something important. Pain becomes a story. Joy becomes a ritual. Even silence is interpreted as message. But where does this compulsion come from? Some believe it's evolutionary, an adaptive trick. Our ancestors needed to see patterns, to recognize cause and effect. That rustling in the grass might be the wind, or it might be a predator. Better to assign meaning, even falsely, than to miss a real threat. So we became meaning makers, interpreters, survivors in a world of uncertainty. Yet somewhere along the line, survival wasn't enough. We began attaching meaning not just to danger, but to beauty, to suffering, to moments that serve no practical purpose except that they feel sacred. A sunset becomes a sign, a coincidence becomes fate, a hardship becomes the turning point in a personal myth. Philosophers suggest meaning isn't found, it's made. But others wonder if meaning is a kind of signal, faint and constant, that we tune into rather than invent. That maybe each person walks a path through chaos, slowly weaving pattern from noise, story from pain, resonance from randomness. Or perhaps it's simpler. We give meaning because we long to belong, not just to a community or a timeline, but to something greater, something that says, you were here, you mattered, this wasn't just chance. So tonight, as your mind softens and wanders, notice what you hold on to, the images, the feelings, the phrases that linger. Those are your meanings, not because they're true or useful, but because they are yours. And that might be divine enough. When the noise fades, the hum of machines, the chatter of thought, even the rhythm of your own breath, what's left is silence. Not emptiness, but something more attentive. A space that doesn't feel blank, but watchful. Almost as if it's holding something unsaid. You may think of silence as absence, but often it's where the real message waits, between the notes of music, between the words in a conversation. The pause before someone speaks, or doesn't. These quiet spaces often say more than sound ever could. Many ancient practices sought silence not to escape the world, but to hear it more clearly. Monks sat in stillness, not because they had nothing to say, but because they believed something deeper might speak through the silence. A message you couldn't hear while distracted. And sometimes, in the quiet, memories return you didn't call for. Emotions rise without warning, not because silence is empty, but because it stops pushing things away. It lets them return. Even your thoughts begin to slow, revealing the quieter self beneath the thinking, the part that simply watches. So maybe silence isn't the absence of meaning. Maybe it's where meaning gathers strength, waiting for you to notice. Look up on a clear night, and the sky seems endless. Stars scatter across the dark like forgotten sparks. Some of that light left its origin before humans even walked upright. The universe is vast, not just in distance, but in age. Billions of years, trillions of worlds. Surely, among them, life must have stirred elsewhere. So why is it so quiet? This is the Fermi paradox, the tension between high probability and zero evidence. By the numbers, intelligent life should be common, and yet we see nothing. No signals, no probes, no whispers in the cosmic dark. We listen, we wait. The silence persists. But silence does not mean emptiness. It may mean misalignment. Imagine a civilization that communicates in neutrino bursts or quantum fluctuations, signals we don't yet know how to recognize, or one that lived and died millions of years before we emerged, its ruins now drifting beyond the reach of telescopes. We search on human timescales. The cosmos operates on something much slower and much faster. Some scientists wonder if we're in a kind of zoo, observed but untouched. Others suggest civilizations self-destruct before reaching interstellar maturity. Then there's the possibility that life is common, but intelligent life that builds radios and rockets is rare, or chooses not to speak. And then there's the stranger thought. What if we've already heard the message, but misunderstood it? Patterns in background radiation, pulsars blinking in rhythm, the structure of mathematics itself. What if the message is woven into the fabric of existence, but we lack the lens to perceive it? Still, we look. A faint signal, a wobble of light, a distant rhythm too precise to be random, not proof, but possibility. Until then, we drift on our small blue planet, turning slowly through the dark. Not alone, perhaps, just waiting for the right question to finally match the answer. Even before we speak, we reach. A newborn, barely aware of the world, seeks warmth, closeness, the steady rhythm of a heartbeat nearby. Long before we understand the word love, we depend on its presence, soft voices, gentle touches, the quiet knowledge that we are not alone. But why? Why does love seem more necessary than even food or air? Imagine yourself in a quiet village centuries ago, a child held by firelight, a mother weaving by hand, a father teaching old songs. Love wasn't luxury, it was survival, not just through protection or provision, but through connection. Because human beings, fragile on their own, endure through bonds, a tribe, a family, a shared breath of care. Without it, even the strongest body begins to fade. Modern science echoes this truth. Studies show that isolation weakens the immune system, that infants without affection, even when fed, fail to thrive. The heart is more than a pump. It listens, it remembers, and it breaks. Which raises a question. Is love simply a clever evolutionary trick to keep us close? Or is it something more? Across cultures, love appears not just in biology, but in poetry, in prayer, in sacrifice. People cross oceans for it, wait lifetimes for it, shape entire identities around its presence or its absence. And though it brings pain, we return to it again and again, as if compelled by something deeper than instinct. Perhaps love is not just a feeling or a strategy or a trick. Perhaps it is the soul recognizing itself in another, a mirror, a language without words. And perhaps that's why we need it, not to survive the world, but to belong to it, to feel, even for a moment, that we are seen, that we are known, that we are not alone. Imagine a world where everything behaves perfectly. Apples fall at the same speed, light travels at a fixed pace, the planets move with a precision that can be predicted centuries in advance. It feels orderly, almost too orderly. Now imagine that every law of nature is not a truth, but a setting. What if reality is code, not metaphorically, but literally? Lines of instruction rendered as gravity, time, emotion. In this view, the universe is not a vast accident, but a program, a simulation. It's not a new idea. Ancient philosophers once spoke of life as a dream or a shadow play on the wall. But today's simulation theory carries a strange modern clarity, with computers that already simulate entire ecosystems, weather, even human behavior. What would stop a civilization, somewhere, someday, from simulating consciousness itself? Your memories, loaded at birth, your body, an avatar adapted to local conditions. The rules, calibrated just enough to feel consistent, until they're not. A déjà vu. A coincidence too perfect. A sudden shift in mood, time, or perception that leaves you asking, was that supposed to happen? Some scientists speculate that quantum strangeness, the way particles change when observed, might be the system loading details only when needed, like a game engine rendering trees only when the player turns their head. And you, who you are, may be a player with selective amnesia, temporary memory loss, so the story feels real, so stakes matter, so love feels earned, and endings feel final. Of course, there's no proof, but maybe that's the point. A good simulation hides itself, and a perfect one lets you forget, just enough to believe it's real, until something glitches, or until you begin to remember. Imagine yourself in a quiet room filled with boxes. Some are neatly labeled, others are worn, the writing faded, their contents unclear. You reach into one, expecting something familiar, but what you find is strange. Not wrong exactly, just unfamiliar in a way that makes you question if you ever packed it yourself. This is your memory, not a recording, but a shifting archive, more story than snapshot. We think of memory as stable, like files on a shelf. But memory is less like storage and more like a rehearsal. Each time you remember something, you recreate it. Not retrieve it, but rebuild it, changing it slightly with each telling. A detail added, a moment softened, a face replaced. Over time, the reconstruction becomes the memory, and the original fades into myth. This fragility raises a deeper question. If you are made of memory, then who are you when memory misfires? Psychologists call it confabulation. False memories we believe completely. We remember conversations that never happened, rooms that never existed, faces that don't belong. These errors aren't glitches. They're part of how the brain fills in gaps to keep the story of you coherent. Because coherence, not accuracy, is what the brain prioritizes. Even traumatic memories, etched so deeply they feel inescapable, can shift with time. The emotions may stay vivid, but the edges blur. The mind edits for survival. It hides things it cannot hold. It recasts roles. It rewrites the ending, not out of deception, but protection. Some neuroscientists suggest memory isn't for the past at all, but for the future. You remember not to look back, but to simulate forward, to run mental rehearsals, test outcomes, make better decisions. Memory becomes a tool for prediction, not a mirror, but a map. And yet, the emotional weight of memory defies that logic. A single scent can unravel you. A familiar song can bring you to tears, not because it's accurate, but because it matters, because it shaped the rhythm of who you believe you are. So tonight, as memories drift in, some sharp, some slippery, don't worry if they don't feel exact. You are not the accuracy of your past. You are the meaning you give it. Even the fragile pieces still hold. Even the broken ones are part of the pattern. You try to say exactly what you feel. You choose your words carefully, hoping they'll land just right. But still, something's always missing. A pause too long, a phrase misunderstood, a look that says, "That's not what I meant," even with someone you love. Maybe especially with someone you love. No thought ever leaves your mind fully intact. By the time it's shaped into language, it's filtered through memory, emotion, fear. Words are tools, but the inner world is vast, and language is small. We use sounds and symbols to carry entire oceans of meaning, and most of it spills in transit. You say, "I'm fine," when you're unraveling. You say, "I love you," hoping it covers all the quiet ways you care. You want them to feel what you feel, but they never do. Not exactly. Their mind receives a version of your message, colored by their own past, their own hopes and doubts. Philosophers call this the privacy of consciousness. No bridge between minds is ever perfect. Even the best connection is still a translation. And yet we keep trying. A touch, a look, a word repeated gently, not to be understood completely, but to be felt anyway. So tonight, if words have failed you, remember, it's not your fault. It's just the nature of the gap. But even imperfect language can still carry love across it. Every thought you have feels like your own. A sudden solution in the shower, a line in a poem, a quiet realization that shifts everything. But trace it back, and it often leads elsewhere. A conversation, a memory, a book, a half-forgotten image. Most ideas are mosaics, assembled from fragments, rearranged echoes. So, where then does originality begin? Philosophers have long debated this. Plato believed all knowledge was remembering. Ideas existed before birth, and we simply recalled them. Enlightenment thinkers, by contrast, saw the mind as a blank slate. Ideas came from experience, nothing more. Today, neuroscientists speak of novelty as pattern recognition, a brain detecting unusual combinations, rewarded with insight. And yet, sometimes something appears that doesn't feel like a remix. A child imagines a game no one taught. An artist paints a vision that arrived, fully formed, in a dream. These moments feel like the mind becoming a conduit, not a creator. As if something passed through, rather than emerged from within. Could it be that the first spark of thought, truly original thought, isn't assembled but received? Some have called it inspiration, others, intuition. A moment of clarity without a traceable source. It may come during stillness, when the usual noise has faded, or when the mind drifts, not trying, simply open. Originality might not be the invention of something new, but the recognition of something timeless, glimpsed, not generated. A thought that didn't belong to any one mind, but simply chose yours to surface in. And so you wonder, was it ever yours at all? Or are we all just vessels, briefly lit by sparks that have no true beginning, only endless reflections, refracted through the lens of attention, and called original the moment we notice them? You look up at the stars. Scattered across the sky, they seem random, like dust flung across velvet. But beneath that beauty lies order, precise laws, predictable patterns, the arc of a planet, the decay of an atom, the bend of light. All of it can be described with numbers, not just approximated, but governed. Why? Imagine yourself in ancient Mesopotamia, watching the moon rise and fall across seasons. Farmers noticed cycles. Priests recorded eclipses. Over time, they found something curious. Nature could be measured, predicted. The Nile would rise after a certain number of days. A shadow would move in a consistent arc. From the start, numbers didn't just describe nature, they seemed to reveal it. Now shift to the present. Mathematicians write equations that describe black holes. Before those black holes are even observed. Particles behave according to symmetries that were predicted decades before experiments confirmed them. It's as if the universe is a vast code, and math is the key that unlocks it. But why should that be true? Some say it's coincidence, that we simply invented math to fit what we see. But others argue the opposite, that math is not invented, but discovered. Like an ancient architecture we've only just begun to map. If that's true, then math is not just a tool, it is the structure itself. The universe doesn't just behave mathematically, it is mathematics, unfolding in form. But this raises a stranger idea. If the universe is ruled by numbers, does it know it's counting? Are we inside a pattern, or part of the pattern itself? Perhaps we'll never know, but each number, each equation, each discovery whispers the same quiet possibility, that beneath the chaos of life is something timeless, cold, perhaps, but elegant, waiting to be seen, waiting to be understood. You wake up in a body you didn't choose, in a time you didn't select, with memories that begin only partway through your story. And yet, at times, something deeper stirs. An inexplicable familiarity, a face you feel you've known, a place that feels like home, though you've never been. Reincarnation, the idea that the soul returns again and again, has lingered across cultures and centuries, from Hinduism to ancient Greek philosophy, from Tibetan scrolls to whispered stories of children recalling past lives. The question remains, what if death is not the end, but a hinge? If the soul does return, why don't we remember? Some traditions say, forgetting is essential. To carry every sorrow, every joy, every regret from one life into the next would be unbearable. So the slate is wiped, gently, but not completely. Hints remain. Habits, fears, longings with no clear origin, as if the past life echoes beneath the surface, shaping the next. Others suggest forgetting is imposed by a veil, a law, a system. That something, call it karma or cosmic design, keeps the cycle spinning, not out of cruelty, but growth. Each life, a new test, a new angle, until you learn enough to step off the wheel. But what breaks it? Some say love, some say truth, others say the realization that the self you cling to, the one who dies and returns, is an illusion. That the soul is not a passenger, but the road, not a person, but the space between all people. So is reincarnation real? Imagine yourself deep inside a cave, not cold, not fearful, just enveloped by stillness. The walls curve around you like the inside of a closed hand. There is no flame yet, only darkness. But in this absence of light, something stirs. The scent of ash that hasn't yet formed. The faint, dry sound of stones being struck together. Then, without ceremony, a spark, a flicker, a soft orange pulse lingers against the rock. The first light has arrived. Long before cities or writing or names carved into stone, someone, an ancestor you'll never know, picked up 2 stones and struck them, not for spectacle, but for warmth, for survival, or perhaps for something deeper. Anthropologists speak of fire as one of humanity's earliest tools, a shift that allowed us to cook, to gather, to imagine beyond the limits of daylight. But before it was a tool, it was a mystery. Fire didn't grow like trees. It wasn't found like water. It was coaxed from friction and hope. In many early societies, fire wasn't merely functional. It was sacred. The hearth became the center of the home, not just physically, but spiritually. Flames were kept alive for generations, never extinguished, carried across migrations, and passed through ceremonies. To light a fire was to perform a quiet ritual, to call something invisible into visibility. And yet, the idea of first light may go back even further, not to the hearth, but to the cosmos itself. Scientists speak of the cosmic dawn, the moment after the Big Bang when light first moved freely through the universe. For hundreds of thousands of years, everything was opaque, silent. Then particles cooled, and photons were released. The first light wasn't seen, it simply was. Unobserved, but radiant. Religious traditions often echo this idea. In the beginning, let there be light, not as technology, not even as warmth, but as awareness, as a threshold between non-being and being, a symbol for understanding, a sign that something had changed. So who lit the first light? A lone figure in a cave, striking stones with calloused hands, a cosmic force, releasing photons into emptiness? Or perhaps it was no one, and the light is simply what happens when any kind of awareness awakens, when the void becomes visible, when the unseen is invited to be known. And as you lie in your own quiet dark, consider that spark, ancient, silent, still glowing somewhere inside you. A reminder that before there was meaning, before there was memory, there was light. A cat doesn't wonder if it's real. A bird doesn't question its name. Most living things simply are, moving, eating, surviving. But you notice. You don't just live, you reflect. You think about thinking. Somewhere along the way, a mirror was placed inside your mind, and now you see yourself seeing. This awareness, this strange loop of recognition, is called consciousness. Not just the ability to sense the world, but to wonder about your place in it, to say, I am, and to ask, but what is I? No one knows exactly when it began. Maybe it emerged slowly, as brains grew more complex, or maybe it arrived all at once, like a sudden awakening. Ancient myths say humans were given the gift, or the curse, of knowledge, that we ate from the tree, opened our eyes, and never looked at the world the same again. Science can trace the wiring, it can measure the brain regions involved, but it can't explain why it feels like something to be you, why the lights are on behind your eyes, and this awareness comes with weight. You feel joy, but also fear, hope, but also mortality. You know you are here, and that one day you won't be. Still, you keep wondering, keep reaching, because to be aware is not just to question, but to listen for an answer, even if one never comes. So tonight, as your thoughts begin to quiet, hold that awareness gently. It may be the strangest, most human thing you carry. You see someone stumble, a stranger you'll never meet again. Still, you reach out. No reward waits. No one will applaud. Yet something in you moves without hesitation. Why? Evolution says we help to protect the group, to ensure survival. Reciprocity, reputation, shared genes, these are the usual explanations. But sometimes, we help without any of that, quietly, anonymously, even at cost to ourselves. History offers countless examples. A soldier shielding a child in a country not his own, a donor who never meets the life they save, a traveler offering food to someone they'll pass just once. These moments don't benefit the helper, not in any tangible way, yet they persist across cultures and centuries. Psychologists call it altruism, and try to pin it to empathy, our ability to feel another's pain as our own. But empathy doesn't always lead to action, and some acts of help occur without emotion, just instinct, as if wired into something deeper. Some philosophers suggest that when we help a stranger, we're responding not to who they are, but to what they reflect. A shared humanness, a fleeting recognition that beneath the layers, language, belief, skin, we are more alike than different. And in helping them, we momentarily dissolve the illusion of separation. Others go further. They propose that the self is not a boundary, but a field. That consciousness, at its root, is interconnected. Helping another is not selflessness. It's a kind of extended self-care, a recognition that what happens to one happens to all. So why do we help strangers? Not always because it's logical, not always because it's safe, but because something ancient and wordless rises when we see another's need. A quiet knowing that, in this vast and temporary life, to ease another's burden, even briefly, is to honor something sacred in us both. You look in the mirror, the face may change, older, tired, unfamiliar. The voice deepens, the memories blur. You've made choices you once couldn't imagine, and abandoned beliefs you once swore were yours. And yet somehow, through all of it, you still call yourself you. But what exactly does that mean? Imagine yourself at 5 years old, small hands, different fears, different joys. That version of you is gone. Every cell replaced, every thought outgrown. You no longer like the same foods. You no longer believe the same truths. So, was that really you, or just a memory? Philosophers have long wrestled with this. John Locke argued that identity is built from memory, that you are the same person if you remember being that person. But what happens when you forget, when trauma erases years, or age blurs the past? Does the self vanish with the recollection? Neuroscience doesn't help much. The brain is plastic. Thoughts shift. Personality traits morph. The self, biologically speaking, is less a statue and more a river, always flowing, never the same twice, and yet we feel something persists, a thread, a presence behind the eyes, even when you lie, even when you change, even when you pretend to be someone else. There is a watcher, a witness, silent, unnamed, unchanging. Maybe that's what you really are. Not the story, not the roles, not even the body, but the awareness itself, the one who watches the changes, the one who remembers forgetting, the one who dreams of being more. And perhaps this is why the question never leaves us, because the self isn't a thing to find, but a process to observe, a flicker of continuity in a world made of change. Not a name, not a face, just presence. You wake up each morning believing you choose what to wear, where to go, whom to love. But sometimes, in quiet moments, a strange feeling creeps in, like the path you're on isn't one you made, but one you've been gently nudged along. Is life random or scripted? On one hand, the world feels chaotic. Accidents, surprises, coincidences that change everything. A missed bus leads to a fateful encounter. A delayed flight saves a life. It's easy to believe the universe rolls dice, but step back, and patterns appear. The orbit of planets, the laws of physics, even your own heartbeat, repeating its rhythm. Could randomness truly build something so precise? Or is there a design, hidden beneath the noise? Some scientists believe determinism governs all, that if we knew every particle's position, we could predict every action. Your choices, your mistakes, your triumphs, all the result of causes stretching back before your birth, like lines in a script already written, but read one page at a time. Others suggest the opposite, that life is improvisation, that free will is real, and every choice sends ripples into the unknown, that nothing is fated, and your next thought is not yet decided. But what if both are true? What if the structure is set, the stage, the setting, the cast of characters, and yet within that you move freely, like a melody that must return to its home note, no matter how wild the tune in between, a rhythm, ancient and quiet, to which you unconsciously dance. So do your choices matter? Maybe not in the way you think, but maybe they matter precisely because you feel them, because you move through this world believing, hoping, deciding. And perhaps that's the point, not to escape the script, but to embody it so fully that it becomes your own. Imagine yourself walking through a quiet forest path. The soil is soft beneath your feet. The air smells of green things, of slow decay and silent growth. Trees rise around you, ancient, still, but always changing. Nothing here is frozen. Even stillness hums with movement. And somewhere beneath that rhythm lies a deeper question. Are we, too, meant to keep changing? Human evolution isn't just about bones and genes. It's about tools, language, memory, desire. Once we hunted with spears. Then we wrote myths on stone. Now we shape algorithms and edit DNA. Each age believes it stands at the edge of completion. And yet, every era is only a beginning. Biologists once spoke of a finished species, a creature so adapted it no longer needs to change. But humans defy that idea. We evolve through culture now, faster than biology can follow. Our bodies still carry echoes of the savannah. our stress responses, our cravings, our need for warmth and connection. But our minds live in skyscrapers, satellites, simulated realities. Some theorists wonder, is this acceleration our design? To never settle, but always refine? Evolution doesn't aim for perfection. It only favors what works for now. And yet, we seek more, not just survival, but meaning, not just existence, but transformation. Perhaps that's the deeper pattern, that we're not evolving toward something, but through everything. A species built not for arrival, but for becoming. So tonight, let yourself drift in that quiet mystery, not needing to arrive, only to continue. You hear it often. We're advancing. Faster machines, smarter systems, deeper understanding. But when you pause, quietly, you might feel a different question rising beneath the surface. What if the best has already passed? Technologically, we've reached beyond the planet, yet we still struggle to be present with each other. Emotionally, we understand more about the mind than ever before, but loneliness grows louder in crowded rooms. Morally, we speak of progress, but conflict, inequality, and cruelty still echo in familiar patterns. Every civilization believes itself to be at the center of time, but archaeologists uncover ruins of past peaks, societies with art, science, wonder that fell without warning, not from lack of intelligence, but from forgetting what held them together. Maybe progress isn't a line, but a cycle. Maybe the golden age isn't ahead or behind, but scattered, appearing briefly in moments of clarity before slipping out of reach again. We imagine the future as better, cleaner, wiser. But what if wisdom was quieter? What if the truest peak was not in invention, but in compassion we've since diluted, or slowness we've lost? And still, the question lingers gently. If we've already peaked, what remains is not just decline, but reflection. A chance to remember what mattered most before it fades entirely. Imagine yourself standing in an empty room. No furniture, no sound, no windows, just stillness. At first, it feels peaceful, then unsettling. Your mind begins to scan for something, movement, meaning, a task, a timeline. But there's nothing, just space, just you, and a quiet that presses inward. This is the fear of nothingness, not of darkness or danger, but of absence. No story to hold, no role to play, no sign that you exist beyond this moment. It's not just death we fear, it's blankness, the erasure of meaning. Human beings are creatures of narrative. From childhood, we build identity through memory, routine, relationships. Even our thoughts unfold in stories. What we want, what we regret, what we hope will come. When those threads are stripped away, what remains? And can we bear to meet it? Some ancient traditions did not run from nothingness. In Buddhism, shunyata, emptiness, is not a void to dread, but a spaciousness to enter. It is freedom from attachment, not loss. In mystic Christianity and the writings of the desert hermits, silence and stillness were doorways to the divine. The absence of story allowed presence to emerge. But in everyday life, nothingness threatens the illusion we work so hard to sustain, that we are always becoming, always progressing, always part of something larger. Without that scaffolding, we feel exposed, untethered. Even sleep, where the self dissolves nightly, can be frightening when it's conscious. The idea of eternal sleep, of ceasing without drama, stirs a deep unease, not always because we expect pain, but because we fear being forgotten, or never having truly been. And yet, in quiet moments, you may glimpse something else, a gentle stillness behind all doing, a soft breath of being that doesn't need a name. In that space, nothingness stops feeling like a void, and begins to feel like rest, like home, like the moment before the first thought, when you simply are. You won't be there to hear your name spoken decades from now. You won't see your photograph on a shelf, or watch strangers trace your handwriting with quiet curiosity. And yet, some part of you wants that, to be remembered, to leave something behind, even knowing you won't be here to witness it. Why? Imagine yourself as a stonecutter in an ancient city. You carve a name into marble, not your own, but someone else's, a ruler, a loved one, a child. You know the stone will outlast you, and still you do it, carefully, reverently, as if the act of remembering is sacred, even if no one remains to understand the meaning. Across time, we've built pyramids, painted portraits, told stories, memorials not just of greatness, but of existence, as if to say, I was here, I mattered. Some say it's fear, fear of death, fear of being erased. Others say it's ego, the desire to echo beyond the grave. But it may go deeper than that. To be remembered is to remain connected, to exist in the minds of others, not as flesh, but as story, as influence, a trace that ripples forward, subtly shaping lives that will never know your face. In that way, memory becomes a second kind of living, softer, quieter, but strangely enduring. Even those who reject fame often want to be remembered by someone, a friend, a family member, a single soul who carries their name like a stone in the pocket. It isn't always about glory. Sometimes it's simply about meaning. If we leave no trace, did we ever truly exist? Perhaps we crave remembrance not for our own sake, but for the idea that the self wasn't wasted, that the life was seen, that the moments mattered, and maybe that's enough. Not to live forever, but to echo just a little longer in the silence that follows. There are moments you forget by morning, and then there are others. A single glance, a quiet word, the warmth of someone's hand before it slips away. These pass in seconds, yet echo for years. How is that possible? Time is meant to move forward, steady, unfeeling. But emotion has its own clock. In love, fear, or grief, seconds stretch thin, like glass drawn into thread. A goodbye that took only a breath can replay in your mind 1,000 times, each time as vivid as the first. Scientists say memory is reconstruction, fragments pulled from different regions of the brain and reassembled, never quite the same. But why do some moments return in perfect stillness? Why do they feel untouched by the years? Maybe because emotion presses into time like a seal into wax. It slows the spin of the world. It carves depth where there should only be sequence. The stronger the feeling, the deeper the groove. And once marked, that groove never really smooths out. Some describe these as eternal moments, not because they never end, but because they live outside the usual rhythm, as if time, for just an instant, made room for something more real, more true, a child's first cry, the final words of someone you'll never see again, a kiss that felt like memory before it even ended. They don't grow old, they don't fade, they hover. So can a moment last forever? Maybe not in the ticking of the clock, but in you, in your silence, in your dreams, in the way your voice softens when you speak of it. It already does. The body may forget, but the soul remembers. And perhaps that's all eternity ever was, not endless time, but a single second that refuses to end. Imagine yourself standing at the base of a ruined stone tower. Moss creeps through the cracks. The carvings are faded, unreadable. Above, birds circle in a sky that has watched this place crumble before, perhaps many times. You don't know who built it or why it fell, only that someone once believed it would last forever. But time, it seems, had other plans. Civilizations tell themselves they're moving forward. That history is a straight road of progress, paved with reason, discovery, and control. But the more we look back, the more we find patterns, empires rising, flourishing, collapsing, and in the ruins, others emerge, often repeating the same ambitions and the same mistakes. The ancient Greeks believed in eternal recurrence. So did early Indian cosmologies, vast cycles of creation and destruction, measured in epochs too long for human minds to grasp. Even Rome, at its height, was filled with writers who warned that decline was inevitable, that golden ages always fade, and memory alone cannot stop the fall. Today, we build faster, think faster, forget faster. But are we any different? We warn of climate, conflict, collapse. We watch power concentrate, then crumble. And yet we continue, as if the motion itself is what defines us, not where we're headed, but the rhythm we repeat. Some say progress is real, that every fall leaves behind fragments, seeds of knowledge we carry forward. Others argue we simply repaint the same patterns, new names, same cycles. What if both are true? That we are spiraling, not circling, returning but not to the same point, higher, maybe, or deeper. So tonight, as you close your eyes, imagine that wheel turning, not to trap you, but to remind you that nothing truly ends, that even the ruins hold echoes, that perhaps the forgetting is part of the dance. Your eyes close, your breath slows, the world fades, but something in you keeps moving, not your body. It stays still beneath blankets and moonlight, but the part of you that sees without eyes, the part that dreams. Where does it go? Science can track brainwaves, label stages, REM, deep sleep, light. It shows the body's patterns, but it cannot follow the wanderer, the you that steps into impossible places. Reunites with people long gone, lives entire lifetimes in minutes, wakes up with memories that dissolve like fog. Some traditions say your soul travels at night, visiting other realms, touching other minds. Others believe dreaming is the brain reorganizing thought, but that doesn't explain why some dreams feel truer than waking life, or why some leave a mark that lingers for years. And what about what follows you back? You've woken with insights you didn't have before, emotions you didn't expect, a sudden sense of peace or dread, as if something returned with you, quietly shifting your course, not seen, just felt. So where do you go when you sleep? Perhaps not far, perhaps within, or perhaps sleep is the door, and dreaming is the message left at the threshold. Whatever it is, it visits you nightly, a silent journey into the dark, returning each time with pieces you can't quite explain, but somehow recognize. You move through the world by touch, by sight, by memory. A chair is solid. Time flows forward. The rules seem stable, but beneath this surface order, something strange persists, a subtle feeling that what we see may not be all there is. That reality might be layered, like fabric folded upon itself, and we're only tracing the topmost thread. Physics has already hinted at this. String theory proposes extra dimensions, compact and curled so tightly we can't perceive them. Not science fiction, but mathematical necessity. 11 dimensions, perhaps more, stitched into the very fabric of space-time. We interact with only 4. The rest remain hidden, not by magic, but by the limits of our senses. But it isn't just science that whispers of more. Mystics, too, have long described veils between worlds, layers of perception only glimpsed in altered states or deep silence. Some speak of a reality more real than this one. Not fantasy, but essence. A hidden architecture behind form. A space where thought and matter blur, and where time doesn't behave the way we expect. Even in your daily life, the illusion flickers. Déjà vu, sudden intuition, the sense you've walked through a moment before it arrived. These may be cognitive glitches, or signs that perception leaks briefly between layers. That the world you call real is only one slice of something far larger, folded in ways you're not built to grasp. If there is a hidden layer, perhaps it's not above or below, but within. A silent dimension not out there in space, but here, beneath attention. Always present, never quite reachable. Not something to find, but something to feel. In the stillness between thoughts, or in the moment before waking, when the curtain hasn't quite fallen back into place. And so, you continue, walking a world that may be one surface of a greater whole, quietly wondering what might be watching from beneath. You've never seen it, you can't weigh it, You can't scan it, dissect it, or trap it in a jar, and yet you feel it. The thing behind your thoughts, the quiet presence when no one's watching. Some call it the soul. Others call it consciousness, essence, the self beneath the self. But what, truly, is it made of? Imagine yourself in an empty room. No mirrors, no names, no distractions, just silence and awareness. You are still there. Even stripped of title, memory, even language itself, something remains. Not your story, not your face, just the watcher, the experiencer. For centuries, humans have tried to name this core. In ancient Egypt, it was the Ba and Ka, the soul's mobility and its anchor. In Hindu philosophy, it is Atman, the eternal witness. The Greeks spoke of psyche, a breath that animated the body. But all of these agree on one thing. The soul is not the same as the mind or the body. It is something else. Modern thinkers struggle with it differently. Some propose consciousness is emergent data, patterns of information processed in complex neural networks. Others suggest it's a quantum phenomenon, flickering beyond the reach of classical physics. Still others abandon substance entirely, calling the soul a metaphor for identity, a story we tell ourselves. But metaphors don't grieve, stories don't dream. And yet, you do. If the soul exists, perhaps it is not made of anything in the way we understand substance, not energy, not matter, not code. But perhaps it is that which gives weight to energy, meaning to memory, depth to silence, a presence lighter than air, but heavier than flesh, felt, not found. And maybe that's the answer we'll never hold, but always carry, a thing without edges, without end, the part of you that watches you change and stays. Listen closely to the world and you'll hear it. Repetition. The tide flows in, then out. The moon disappears, then returns. Heartbeats, breaths, seasons. Even your thoughts circle back, as if some unseen rhythm is always playing just beneath the surface. Why do patterns repeat? In nature, it's everywhere. The swirl of a galaxy echoes the spiral of a seashell. The branching of trees mirrors the vessels in your lungs. Mathematicians call it fractals, self-similar structures that repeat at every scale. But this goes beyond shapes. It shows up in your choices, in your relationships, in the same lessons returning, life after life. Music understands this instinctively. A theme introduced, then varied, repeated, built upon. The comfort of the familiar, threaded through the surprise of change. Your emotions do the same. A grief reawakened by a smell. A joy triggered by a melody. Circles inside circles. Some say this is efficiency, evolution favoring what works. Others suggest it's a sign that the universe isn't a straight line, but a spiral. Always moving forward, but around something central. Growing outward, yet always returning. Spiritual traditions have long believed in cycles, of death and rebirth, of karma, of time itself folding back. That what feels like repetition is actually refinement, not a trap, but a dance. And maybe that's why lessons return until they're learned. Why certain people enter your life again and again, wearing different faces. Not because you failed, but because the rhythm continues until the note is resolved. So when you notice a pattern repeating, pause, not to escape it, but to listen. Something ancient may be speaking, not in words, not in commands, but in spirals, in echoes, in the quiet music of things coming back, not because they must, but because they still matter. Imagine yourself inside a vast library. The air is still. The shelves stretch upward beyond sight, lined with books no one's opened in ages. Some are familiar. Others are marked in symbols you don't recognize. You reach for one, but for every answer it gives, a dozen more questions unfold. It's not lack of time that holds you back. It's that the further you go, the wider the mystery becomes. There's a popular myth that we only use a small portion of our brain, that if we could access all of it, unlock every neuron, the veil would lift. We'd see the truth behind everything. the edge of reality, the code beneath the dream. But neuroscience tells us the brain is always active, just not all at once. Its limitations aren't about power, they're about architecture, structure, evolution. Still, the deeper truth may be stranger. Every attempt to fully know the universe places us inside the very system we're trying to explain. We are made of the same particles we study, bound by the same rules we question. Can a map draw itself? Can a mirror reflect its own glass? Mathematician Kurt Gödel showed that in any logical system, there will always be truths that can't be proven within that system, limits built into the very nature of understanding. A boundary we may never cross, not because we're not intelligent enough, but because no mind, however vast, can stand outside itself. And yet we keep reaching. We chart galaxies, simulate consciousness, decode genomes, not to conquer the unknown, but to illuminate its shape, to feel our way through the dark with questions as our only light. So tonight, as your thoughts slow and drift, consider this. Maybe we're not meant to know everything. Maybe we're meant to wonder endlessly, to circle the mystery like moths around a lamp, never touching it, but always moving toward the glow. Every story begins with a creator, a god, a force, a spark, something that begins everything else. But if the universe has a builder, who built them? Ancient myths wrestled with this endlessly. The Greeks imagined chaos before gods and gods before men. Hindu cosmology speaks of infinite cycles, creators born, destroyed, and reborn without beginning. In each tale, creation needs a creator, but that creator always carries the shadow of its own unknown origin. Science faces a similar loop. The Big Bang explains what happened, but not why it happened, or what came before. Some theories say time itself began at that point, making before meaningless. But your mind still circles back. Something must have started the start. It's a recursive ache. Every answer opens another door. Every god has a parent. Every cause needs a cause. Until you find yourself in a spiral with no bottom. A paradox wrapped in silence. Maybe that's the nature of origin. It's not meant to be solved, only sat with, like a koan whispered by the universe to keep your mind gently turning. So tonight, as your thoughts begin to quiet, ask without expecting reply, if everything must begin somewhere, where did beginning begin? And who, if anyone, lit the first match? There's a quiet moment after joy, a hush that follows closeness, success, or peace, when a strange tension rises, a thought you didn't invite, a suspicion, a sudden need to pull away, say too much, or break something fragile. It doesn't make sense, and yet, again and again, we damage the very things we long to hold. Why? Some call it fear of loss, that when something feels too good, the shadow of its ending becomes unbearable. So we reach for control, not to preserve, but to ruin it on our terms. It hurts less, perhaps, to fall by choice than to be caught off guard by time or fate. But it goes deeper than fear. Sometimes, joy itself feels foreign. If you've grown used to struggle or silence, happiness can seem unearned, an intruder in a landscape shaped by caution. The nervous system doesn't always recognize safety. It waits for the blow, even when none is coming. And in waiting, we push the joy away before it can leave on its own. Psychologists call it self-sabotage, but that word misses the tenderness inside it. These acts often come from old wounds, patterns meant to protect, not destroy. Somewhere deep, a part of you may believe love must be conditional. That peace is fragile, that if you relax into joy, you'll lose your guard and lose everything. Even in mythology, paradise is fleeting. Eden ends. The gift always has a cost. We've inherited the belief that joy must be paid for, that closeness must be tested, that love cannot last without proof. But sometimes, all that's needed is pause, to notice the instinct to retreat without obeying it, to recognize joy not as danger, but as home. and to slowly teach the heart that it's allowed to stay open, even when it shakes. So if you've ever hurt what you cherished, it wasn't weakness. It was your way of asking, can I really trust this? Can I truly let it in? The answer doesn't arrive all at once, but each time you soften instead of shatter, you come closer. Before words, there was wind, there was light, the scent of rain on dry stone, a child's breath, the arc of stars shifting slowly over an untouched horizon, all of it real, all of it true, but none of it named. Which leads to a quiet question. If you couldn't speak, if you couldn't even think in words, would truth still exist? Imagine yourself alone in a vast forest. No voice, no inner dialogue, just senses. You hear a branch snap. You feel hunger. You see the sun move overhead. You know something is happening, without needing to explain it, without needing to name it. That knowing is a kind of truth, raw, wordless, complete. Language gives shape to experience. It lets us trap a feeling in a sentence, build systems, define laws, but it also distorts. Words simplify what is fluid. They force choices, either or, yes, no, now, later, onto realities that are often neither. Language doesn't just describe truth, sometimes it replaces it. Still, without language, how would we share what we see? How would we remember what we've felt? Words link one mind to another, and in doing so, create consensus, shared reality. But that doesn't mean truth is born from words, only that it becomes visible through them. Animals live in truth without language. A hawk knows how to hunt. A deer knows where to hide. They navigate the world not with grammar, but with attention, with instinct, with presence. And in some ways, their truths are purer, untouched by narrative, untouched by belief. So perhaps truth is not made of language, but language is how we search for it. A tool, a map, not the territory. And when the words fall away, when silence arrives, truth doesn't vanish. It waits, still and whole, like the stars before we gave them names. It begins with vibration, just air shifting pressure, waves moving through space. There is no meaning in the sound itself, and yet, somehow, it finds us. A simple melody can lift your heart or shatter it. A single note can summon memories you haven't touched in decades. Why? Music doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for you to understand. It bypasses language, sidesteps reason, and lands somewhere deeper, where logic can't follow. It reaches into you the way light slips under a closed door. Biologically, we can trace it. Your brain releases dopamine. Your heartbeat syncs with rhythm. But that doesn't explain why a minor chord feels like longing, or why a violin can sound like forgiveness. Even before language, humans made music. Drums in caves, lullabies in darkness. It was never just entertainment. It was ritual, connection. A bridge between inner silence and outer sound. Across cultures, music has always reached for something larger. Mourning, celebration, prayer. Maybe that's why it feels sacred. Even a few notes in the right sequence can feel like truth. Not spoken truth, but remembered, as if the soul recognizes something it once knew. And sometimes, music says what you didn't know you felt until it played. Some theories suggest we are rhythmic beings, that the pulse of blood, the rise and fall of breath, tunes us into music before we're even born. That harmony is not decoration, but home. So why does music move us? Maybe because it reminds us we are more than thoughts, that there is something inside us, soft, ancient, wordless, that still knows how to feel. And when melody touches it, that part of us stirs. It listens, and it remembers who we are beneath the noise. Imagine yourself beside a still lake at dawn. The surface is quiet, unbroken. You toss in a small stone, not with force, just curiosity. The ripples spread gently outward, silent but certain. You watch the rings widen, fade, disappear. And you wonder, is the lake responding to you, Or was it always meant to move that way? Throughout history, people have whispered the idea that thought shapes outcome, that desire, fear, even expectation magnetize events. Ancient texts spoke of karma, not just action, but intention echoing outward. Mystics describe the heart as a compass, subtly pulling us toward what we carry inside. Today, it's echoed in softer forms: manifestation, synchronicity, quantum mind theories. But science is careful. Emotion isn't gravity. Wishing doesn't bend space. And yet, patterns still emerge. We fear rejection and act defensively, inviting what we hoped to avoid. We expect disappointment and filter every gesture as confirmation. We long for love, and in softening, become more open to it. Not by magic, but by behavior, presence, attention. Still, some researchers have gone further. Studies on consciousness and probability hint that subtle mental focus may affect physical outcomes, not strongly, not predictably, but statistically, like the mind and matter are in quiet conversation. Even stranger, memory and imagination share the same neural pathways. The brain rehearses futures like it replays pasts. So when we feel a future deeply, when we imagine it with detail and emotion, it can shape our choices without our noticing. Slowly, like a tide pulling us toward a version of ourselves we're still becoming. So tonight, ask quietly, not what the future holds, but what you're holding that may shape it. Not in force, but in frequency. In the gentle ripples of thought and feeling that reach further than you realize. Perhaps fate isn't fixed or foreign. Perhaps we are always circling the reflections we send out first. Some days unfold too perfectly. A chance meeting. A lesson wrapped in failure. An ending that arrives with timing too elegant to feel random. It makes you wonder, am I living or being written? Stories follow arcs. Characters change, struggle, grow. They meet symbols dressed as people, mentors, rivals, mirrors. And your life, when viewed from a distance, seems to do the same. Moments repeat, lessons return. You begin to suspect, perhaps you're not crafting your life as freely as you believed. Maybe you're being revealed, not invented. In literature, characters rarely know they're in a story. Their suffering has meaning they can't yet see. Their joy is a pause, not a conclusion. They move through pages unaware of the hand that writes them. And what if we're the same, shaped by events we don't control, yet changed by how we move through them? We say we choose, but often we react, we adapt, we become. It's tempting to believe we're the author, but perhaps we're the unfolding. A plotline whispered by something deeper, written not in ink, but in pattern, rhythm, and timing. And maybe that's not limiting, but comforting. Because if you are a story, then even the chaos serves a purpose. Even silence is part of the script. So tonight, as the world quiets, ask gently, if I'm a character, what kind of story am I in? And who might be turning the page? The idea that everything is connected often feels poetic, a comforting phrase. But beneath the metaphor lies a deeper question, one that crosses science, philosophy, and experience, not just emotionally connected, but literally. Can a butterfly's wing and a distant war arise from the same root? In physics, connection is not optional, it's foundational. Quantum entanglement shows that particles can become linked in ways we don't fully understand. Change one, and the other responds, no matter the distance. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. But it happens, not metaphor, measurement. Zoom out further. Every atom in your body was forged in the heart of a star. The iron in your blood, the calcium in your bones, all remnants of explosions billions of years ago. The same dust that became planets also became people. And with each breath, you exchange particles once held by strangers, trees, oceans. There is no edge to this web, only movement within it. Chaos theory adds another layer. Small changes in one part of a system can create enormous effects elsewhere. A butterfly flapping its wings in one country might, through countless interlinked events, influence the path of a hurricane across the world. The war and the wing beat are not causally connected in any visible way, but they exist in the same fabric, shaped by the same invisible currents. Even in the mind, connection runs deep. One memory triggers another. An emotion arises from a scent, a sound, a word. You are not a separate observer of the world, but part of it, woven through it. So yes, perhaps everything is connected, not in a way that always makes sense, not in a way we can map, but in a way that matters. The butterfly, the war, the heartbeat, the silence, different notes in the same endless song, and you, listening now, are part of it too. We picture it as a beginning, a point, a flash, a moment when nothing became everything. The Big Bang, a phrase so familiar it sounds almost comforting. But what does it really mean? What was there before there? And how can anything begin if there was no time to begin in? Imagine yourself at the edge of the known. No stars, no darkness, not even emptiness, just absence. Not space waiting to be filled, but the absence of space itself. No before, no after, just a stillness without context. Then, suddenly, energy, expansion, heat. The birth of time, matter, distance, a universe unfolding, not into something, but creating the something as it went. Physicists call this the beginning of spacetime, where the laws of physics as we know them cease to apply. There was no outside the Big Bang, because outside didn't exist. Asking what came before is like asking what's north of the North Pole. It's a direction that loses meaning at the edge, and yet, we ask, because we feel the paradox. Every fire needs a spark, every story, a first word. Some theories suggest that the universe came from a quantum fluctuation, a brief, spontaneous bloom from nothing. Others hint at multiverses, where our cosmos is just one ripple in an endless sea. But these are maps drawn in a language still being invented. Religions, too, have offered beginnings. Breath, will, word, silence. Not answers exactly, but mirrors, each reflecting the same awe, that something emerged, that we are here to wonder. Perhaps the origin of the universe is not just a physical question, but a philosophical one. Not just what happened, but why is there anything at all? A spark? A breath? A question that created itself? We may never know, but still we ask. And in the asking, perhaps, the universe begins again. You look at the world, a falling apple, a distant star, the curve of a river, and math explains it, not just roughly, but precisely. Equations predict eclipses, describe black holes, even mimic the rhythm of your heartbeat. But math is abstract, a symbol system. So why does it fit the universe so perfectly? Why should something invented by minds also shape the cosmos? Some say math was discovered, not created, that it was always there, woven into the fabric of existence, waiting to be noticed, like invisible scaffolding beneath the visible world. Numbers don't just count things, they describe them. The ratio of a spiral in a shell, the symmetry of snowflakes, the parabola of a thrown stone, patterns too elegant to be coincidence. Others argue that math is just a tool, useful, but not truth, that we project its logic onto the world and notice what fits. But even so, why does it fit so well? Why do imaginary numbers help describe real quantum fields? Why does geometry whisper the shape of galaxies? Some philosophers suggest a deeper mystery, that reality is mathematical, that matter itself arises from relationships, ratios, quantities, balance, that the universe isn't a thing, but a pattern, a kind of music, and math is its sheet music. Even emotion, chaotic, messy, human, has rhythm. Patterns in speech, in tone, in neural firing. Music, too, is math felt rather than solved. So did math create matter, or does it simply reveal the structure of something already beyond us? There may never be a final answer, but the next time you see a shadow curve across the floor, or hear the timing of raindrops on glass, listen closely. You might be hearing the universe counting quietly to itself. Imagine yourself sitting in a quiet room. You reach out and place your hand on a table. It feels solid, cool, steady beneath your skin. The floor beneath your feet holds your weight. The walls don't move. The world feels dense, grounded, unquestionable. But now, close your eyes. Picture zooming inward, past skin, past cells, past atoms, until what felt solid begins to blur. At the atomic level, matter becomes strange. What we call solid is mostly space. If you could remove all the empty space from the atoms in your body, you would shrink smaller than a grain of sand. The nucleus, tiny, dense, and spinning, is surrounded by electron clouds that never truly touch anything. What you feel as resistance isn't contact, but electromagnetic repulsion. Go deeper still, and the particles themselves blur into probabilities. In quantum physics, particles don't have a fixed position or form until they're observed. They exist in waves of possibility. Matter, then, is not a thing, but a tendency to appear a certain way when you look at it. Some physicists suggest that even these particles may not be fundamental. They may emerge from something else, patterns, vibrations, mathematical fields. That what we call reality is a kind of information, organized in ways we can interact with, tangible only because our senses evolved to detect certain patterns. So, is matter real? It depends how you define real. It's consistent, measurable, but it may not be what it seems, only how it seems. The illusion of solidity may be a convenient story told by your nervous system, stitched together from empty space, electrical charge, and habit. Tonight, as your breath slows and your body sinks into the bed, remember that even what feels heavy is built from silence, that the world you trust to hold you is more mystery than substance, and yet it holds you all the same. Is decay a natural law, or just a side effect of being alive? From the moment you're born, the clock begins. Cells divide, repair, replace. And for a time, it works beautifully. Cuts heal, bones mend, you grow. But quietly, almost invisibly, the process begins to slow. Errors slip in. Damage accumulates. And one day, the repairs don't quite keep up. You start to age. Science offers many explanations. Telomeres, those protective caps on your chromosomes, shorten with each division. Mitochondria falter. Proteins misfold. It's not one cause, but a slow unraveling of balance. Entropy at work. A quiet surrender to time. But why build life to fade? Why not create bodies that endure? Some believe aging exists because it ends us. Nature doesn't prioritize long life, just successful reproduction. Once your role is fulfilled, biology lets go. Not cruelly, just efficiently. Still, it feels personal. You remember being younger. You feel the changes. Some welcome, many strange. And behind it all is the quiet realization. This isn't forever. Not your face, not your breath, not your story. But aging also deepens you. It teaches softness, perspective, letting go. A kind of wisdom that doesn't come quickly. So perhaps aging isn't just decay, but transformation. A slow turning of pages, a rhythm written into every living thing. And as you rest tonight, feel the stillness not as loss, but as part of a longer unfolding, a body returning gently to the silence it once emerged from. Pain arrives without invitation, a loss, a silence, a fracture in the shape of what once was certain. In those moments, meaning feels distant, sometimes impossible. And yet, as time passes, we often look back and assign purpose to the wound. We say we grew, we learned, we became. But is that meaning real, or simply the story we need to tell? Across cultures, suffering has always carried weight. In myth, heroes descend before they rise. In religion, trials refine the soul. Even in psychology, pain is framed as transformative. trauma yielding resilience, struggle revealing depth. These narratives offer comfort, but they also raise a quiet question. Do we find meaning in suffering, or do we invent it to endure? The brain seeks patterns, even in chaos. When something hurts, it asks why. And when no answer comes, it makes one. A lesson, a purpose, a thread that links the ache to a larger whole. Not because it's certain, but because it's necessary. Meaning soothes, even when it's stitched together from fragments. Yet there are kinds of pain that resist redemption. Grief that lingers. Injustice without closure. Some suffering defies shape or reason. And still, we carry it. We integrate it. Not always to transcend it, but to survive it. To keep moving. Maybe meaning isn't hidden inside the pain itself, waiting to be discovered. Maybe it's something we lay gently over the wound like a blanket, not to cover it, but to hold it. And maybe that act, the quiet choosing of meaning, is what gives suffering its strange dignity. Not because it was deserved, not because it was needed, but because you lived through it and made something in its wake. In the end, the meaning of suffering may not lie in answers, but in endurance, in the way you carry it, in the softness that remains, in the space it opens, for deeper feeling, quieter kindness, and the fragile beauty of having felt at all. A gentle tilt of 23.5 degrees, just enough to create seasons, but not chaos. An atmosphere rich in oxygen, thin enough to breathe, thick enough to shield. A magnetic field to deflect radiation, liquid water, a stable orbit, and circling above it all, a moon that tugs the tides, steadies the spin, and reflects just enough light to echo the sun's rhythm. Earth, in nearly every measurable way, sits on the edge of improbable balance. But how? Imagine stepping back, far back, into the vastness of space, billions of stars, planets tumbling in every shape and orbit, some too hot, some too cold, gas giants with no surface, rocky worlds with poisonous skies, and then this one, blue, breathing, alive, a fragile film of biology wrapped around molten rock, perfectly positioned in a zone scientists call habitable, but poets might simply call home. Is it coincidence? Some argue yes, that in an infinite cosmos, even the rarest combinations will eventually occur, that Earth is not chosen, but simply one of countless experiments, most of which failed. We exist here not because it was destined, but because life only arises where the conditions are right. We observe this planet's perfection because it's the only one we can observe. Others wonder if there's more, if the symmetry and balance hint at design, not necessarily by a hand, but by a principle, a deeper logic, a tendency in the universe toward complexity, toward awareness, not imposed from above, but rising from within, as if the universe, given time, wants to know itself, and Earth is where it began to remember. Whether accident or architecture, Earth remains improbable, not perfect in the sense of flawless, but perfect in the sense of possible. A cradle not just for life, but for thought, for wonder, for the quiet question, why here? Why now? And maybe, why us? A woman survives a fall that should have ended her life. A child speaks of places they've never seen. A stranger arrives with the right words at the exact moment they're needed. These moments are often called miracles, exceptions to the rules. But what if they're not exceptions at all? What if they are the rules, just ones we don't understand yet? History is full of events once labeled impossible. Lightning was once divine anger, disease, a curse. The idea that invisible organisms could sicken us was once unthinkable. But the laws didn't change. We just learned to see them more clearly. So when something breaks expectation, a healing, a vision, an impossible coincidence, maybe it's not magic and not madness. Maybe it's a glimpse, a fracture in the familiar, a law peeking through that hasn't yet been written down. Science requires repeatability. Miracles, by nature, resist that. They arrive without warning, without control. But perhaps they are patterns too subtle to detect, too vast to measure, like watching one ripple in an ocean and calling it chance. In ancient texts, miracles were signs, not proof of chaos, but hints of deeper order, reminders that what we call impossible is only a reflection of what we don't yet know. And sometimes what we call miraculous is simply timing, a convergence of variables beyond comprehension, a door opening just as you approach it, not because the rules were broken, but because you don't yet know how the hinges work. So, are miracles real? Maybe not in the way we think, but maybe reality is stranger, softer, and more generous than we realize. And every so often, it lets the unknown slip through, just enough for us to feel wonder again. Imagine yourself walking through a quiet field just after rain. The sky is still heavy with clouds, and the earth beneath you is soft, rich with the scent of water and roots. Everything is calm, but you carry something heavy, not in your hands, not in your chest exactly, but somewhere deeper. A weight that can't be explained by muscle or bone, a tiredness that doesn't go away with rest. There is a kind of pain that defies injury, a kind of sorrow that lingers long after the event that caused it. We say it hurts the soul, but what do we mean? No doctor can scan for it. No words quite describe it, yet nearly everyone, at some point, has felt it. A hollowness after betrayal, a quiet ache in the wake of meaning lost, a grief not tied to one person, but to something larger, like the world stopped recognizing you. Some philosophers call it existential fatigue, the erosion of the self when life feels unrooted, not depression exactly, but depletion. Others trace it to trauma, when the body survives, but the inner world fractures. In some cultures, it's called soul loss, a disconnection between your spirit and the rhythm of your life. The cause can be sudden or slow, like a candle burning out. But perhaps the soul isn't something mystical or separate. Perhaps it's the deepest expression of who you are, your capacity to feel meaning, connection, presence. And when those are broken or stretched too thin, you feel that loss not in tissue, but in identity. Still, just as pain can reach the soul, so can healing. Not through force, but through return. Small rituals, gentle repetition, silence that makes space again. People who see you without needing to fix you. So tonight, if something inside you feels drained, don't rush to fill it. Let it rest. Let it breathe. Not everything broken needs repair. Some things only need remembering that you are still here, still feeling. And slowly, that may be enough. You see faces in clouds, patterns in static, signs in numbers that repeat. Even when something is random, your mind leans in, searching, not just for sense, but for meaning. This isn't weakness. It's instinct. The brain evolved to connect dots, even if none exist. A rustle in the grass could be wind or danger. Seeing a pattern, even falsely, once meant survival. But today, the habit remains, refined, expanded. Now, we don't just search for threats, we search for purpose. Even chaos begs to be understood. We say things happen for a reason, even when reason isn't clear. We string moments into narratives, turn heartbreak into lessons, paint meaning onto silence. Why? Because meaning gives shape to experience. It soothes randomness. It gives weight to memory. It turns pain into something survivable, and joy into something shareable. Religion, art, science, they all begin in the same place, the ache to understand. Even dreams and coincidences aren't spared. Your mind decodes symbols even while you sleep. Some call it pattern recognition. Others call it soul. But either way, you are built to wonder, what does this mean? Not to find a final answer, but to feel less alone inside the question. So tonight, if your thoughts drift towards something unresolved, let them. That search is ancient. And maybe, just maybe, it's the most human thing you do. You meet someone, and something shifts. Not just affection, not just comfort. It feels as though something deeper aligns. Words form before you speak them. Silences feel full. Your memories begin to blur at the edges. What was yours? What was theirs? You're still yourself, but altered. As if two centers of gravity have pulled into orbit around a single unseen point. Love explains some of it, empathy, bonding, shared experience. But this feels beyond even that. The question rises quietly: can two souls merge? In many spiritual traditions, the answer is yes. Some see soulmates not as romance, but reunion, a return to something once whole. In Sufi poetry, the beloved becomes the self. In Hindu texts, true union dissolves the barrier between I and you. What remains is presence, shared, indivisible. Science doesn't speak of souls, but connection still runs deep. Brains in conversation begin to synchronize, heartbeat, breath, even neural rhythms. Mirror neurons reflect another's experience as if it were your own. Over time, long-term partners start to resemble each other in gesture, tone, even biology. We change, not beside one another, but with one another. And in trauma too, memories can pass like echoes. One person's wound awakens another's tenderness, or pain, or understanding too intimate to explain. Memory becomes communal. Identity begins to soften. Still, complete merging is rare. Even the deepest connection leaves a space between. Subtle, sacred. A place where difference breathes. Because maybe merging isn't disappearance. Maybe it's resonance. Two instruments, tuned so precisely, they create something neither could alone. So can two souls merge, not by vanishing, but by unfolding, into each other, through each other, until the line blurs, not into one, but into something new, quiet, wordless, whole, a chill of fear, a surge of joy, a quiet ache in the chest when no one else is near. Emotions often feel private, internal weather we carry alone. But what if they aren't confined to us? What if every feeling is a kind of signal, pulsing outward, received or echoed by something larger than ourselves? Imagine yourself walking into a room moments after an argument. No words are spoken, but the tension lingers, thick in the air. You feel it, without being told. Similarly, think of laughter rippling through a crowd, one person's joy triggering another's without logic or planning. It's as if emotion can leap from one mind to the next. Science offers a few clues. Mirror neurons, for example, allow us to feel what others feel, a kind of built-in empathy. And some researchers suggest that heart rhythms, electromagnetic fields, and brainwave states subtly synchronize between people, especially during intense emotional moments, as if we're tuning forks, resonating with each other. But could it go further? Ancient traditions speak of shared fields, the noosphere, chi, prana, suggesting that emotion is not just reaction, but transmission, that our inner state ripples through a collective atmosphere of consciousness, not metaphorically, but energetically. You feel sadness, and someone, somewhere, softens without knowing why. If this is true, then perhaps emotion is not weakness or noise, but data. A signal not meant to be suppressed, but shared. Not just about you, but from you. Part of a network of sensing, responding, attuning. The same way birds change direction in unison, or trees warn each other through roots. Connection without explanation. And maybe, just maybe, that quiet ache or sudden joy is the universe listening back. A signal returned, a feeling not just felt, but received. You open your eyes, you feel the room around you, the light, the weight of your body, the memory of yesterday. It all feels real, solid, undeniable. But so did the dream you had last night, until it wasn't. So what if this isn't waking? Dreams have their own gravity, their own logic. In them, you never question where you came from, or why time bends, or why someone long gone still walks beside you. You simply accept, you believe, until something cracks, and you awaken, shaken by how easily you were fooled. Now ask, what if this is just the next layer? Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. Descartes questioned whether we could ever be sure we weren't dreaming. Modern scientists have studied brain states where reality blurs. Hypnagogia, lucid dreaming, even anesthesia, where consciousness flickers between layers, and in each, the world feels complete, until it isn't. Some traditions suggest life is a dream, not metaphorically, but literally, a lucid trance we pass through, lifetime after lifetime, forgetting what came before. They whisper that death isn't an ending, but another waking, another eyelid lifting in a larger mind. And sometimes, you may feel it. A moment of unreality in your day, a glitch in time, a face that seems too familiar, the nagging sense that something is missing. These aren't mistakes. They might be invitations, not to panic, but to wonder. So, what if you're not awake? Maybe that's not a warning. Maybe it's a comfort. Because if this is just a dream, then somewhere beyond this version of you, something is watching, waiting, ready to open its eyes and remember. Imagine yourself sitting before a blank page. The room is quiet. Nothing stirs. And yet, an image forms, a phrase, a sound. Something arrives that wasn't there before. You didn't invent it. You didn't search for it. It simply appeared, as if it had been waiting just beyond the edge of thought, asking to be noticed. For centuries, people have asked where creativity begins. The Greeks believed in muses, divine beings who whispered ideas to artists and thinkers. In many cultures, inspiration was not owned by the individual. It was visited upon them, something outside the self, moving through, not from. Modern science looks inward. Creativity, we're told, is the brain making unusual connections, memory reassembled, emotion rearranged, a spark between distant regions of the mind. The right kind of boredom, the right kind of pressure, and suddenly, something new emerges. But even this doesn't fully explain the feeling, the way melodies come whole, the way a painting unfolds without plan, the way stories arrive fully formed, as if remembered, not constructed. Some researchers suggest that imagination may draw on more than memory, that the brain can simulate experiences it's never had by blending fragments into something that feels real. Or perhaps, as some quietly wonder, imagination is not creation at all, but recall. Not of this life, but of something older, a pattern buried deep within consciousness itself, a place beyond language that speaks in color, sound, symbol, and feeling. Not fiction, but a different kind of truth. So tonight, as you drift, let your mind wander. Let it make strange shapes. Let the images come without asking what they mean. Creativity isn't always meant to be understood. Sometimes, it's just the echo of something timeless, passing through you on its way back home. A circle drawn in sand, a whispered phrase, a candle lit not for light but for memory. From the outside, rituals may seem like repetition, empty movements, outdated symbols, but something in you still feels different when you do them. Even small acts, a quiet prayer, a hand on the heart, the way you pause before stepping into something unknown, carry a weight you can't quite explain, as if they're more than habit, as if they reach through time. Rituals are older than writing. They shaped the first human stories long before language. They marked life and death, bonded families, asked the unseen to listen. Were they magic, metaphor, or tools to shift the inner world? Some believe rituals open doors, briefly reconnecting us to something ancient, or to versions of ourselves we forget in daily life. Science might call it suggestion, a mental cue to change state. But even science can't explain why people across cultures perform nearly the same gestures in moments of fear, love, and loss. Perhaps rituals don't change the world outside, but rearrange the one within. And maybe that's enough. So tonight, as you fold your blanket, light a lamp, or close your eyes in a certain way, notice the pattern, not for superstition, but for the quiet power of intention. Maybe the old doors never truly closed. Maybe you've just been whispering the key all along. Before language, before memory, before even the shape of time, something stirred. Not an idea, not yet, but a flicker, a tension, a movement toward awareness. The first thought wasn't a sentence or even a word, it was a leaning, a question forming in silence before questions existed. What created that? We often ask where thoughts come from, but that assumes a thinker already in place, a mind, formed and functioning. But before the mind could wonder, it had to arise. So the deeper question is, what first wanted to know? What woke up inside stillness and began reaching? Some say it was biology, neurons firing, complexity emerging from chaos. Over time, systems learned to reflect, compare, anticipate. In this view, thought was an accident of matter. But even here, mystery lingers. Why did awareness come at all? Why not remain in still reaction, stimulus, response, nothing more? Others suggest that consciousness is not the end product but the origin. That thought didn't emerge from the universe, it preceded it. The ancient Vedic texts speak of pure awareness, giving rise to form. In these traditions, thought is not created by the brain, but filtered through it, a signal, not a source. Then there's the possibility that the first thought was simply inevitable, like the way a seed splits when pressure builds. That existence, once sparked, had to become aware, not from desire, but from unfolding. The same way light, when bent, reveals a spectrum, awareness, when stretched far enough, begins to reflect. So what created thought itself? Maybe nothing did. Maybe it was always there, waiting, like the moment before a breath or the pause before music begins. A potential held in stillness until something, somewhere, softly asked, "What is this?" And in that question, thought was born, not as an answer, but as the first reaching, the first shimmer of knowing, just before it knew what knowing was. You step into the world each day with thoughts, fears, hopes, mostly invisible to others. But still, reality seems to respond. A kindness returned, a coldness reflected. You notice patterns, repeating feelings, familiar endings. And quietly, you begin to wonder, is this just coincidence, or is the universe showing you yourself? Imagine walking through a quiet city at dawn. If you expect hostility, every glance feels sharp. If you carry warmth, even silence seems softer. The world doesn't change, but your perception shapes it. This is more than optimism. It's a feedback loop. Your beliefs color your behavior. Your behavior shapes your experience, and that experience reinforces your belief. Some call it psychology. Others call it vibration, manifestation, karma. Different names, same rhythm. Even physics plays along, in its own way. The observer effect shows that watching a particle can influence its behavior. On the quantum level, the mere act of attention shifts outcomes. Now, scale that idea up, not literally, but metaphorically. What if your emotional focus bends not atoms, but outcomes? What if reality reflects what you bring to it? Hate echoed becomes more hate. Fear spreads like smoke. But love, genuine, grounded, quietly consistent, ripples. You may not see the return immediately, but slowly, across moments and strangers and small intersections, something shifts. Not always dramatically, but unmistakably. Perhaps the universe isn't watching you, but perhaps it responds to you. Not as a reward or punishment, but as a mirror, reflecting not just actions, but intention, energy, the tone behind your voice, the thoughts behind your silence. And maybe this is the quiet truth hiding in plain sight. To change the world, begin with what you send into it. Because even if the universe is not a perfect mirror, it listens, and sometimes it answers. During the day, the world is noisy. Light spills across your thoughts, scattering them like leaves in wind. You answer messages, move through routines. The surface stays busy. But then, night arrives, and everything shifts. At 3 a.m., something strange happens. The silence isn't just quiet, it's alive. Thoughts you avoided all day, now lean in close. Regrets emerge like familiar ghosts. Dreams bleed through the seams of consciousness, half remembered, half true. The world feels thinner, as if something behind it is breathing. Why? Some say it's biology. The circadian rhythm dips, the body quiets, and the brain replays its memories, unfiltered. Without distraction, emotion rises. But the explanation feels too clinical for something so deeply felt. Night seems to change the depth of time. A single hour stretches like a hallway with no doors. The ticking clock sounds louder. Shadows grow longer. Memory takes on weight. The world feels paused, yet more honest, almost holy. Throughout history, the night has always spoken. Poets listened. Mystics prayed. Insomniacs whispered secrets to ceilings. Darkness, by stripping away the visible, reveals what is usually hidden, inside and out. And maybe that's why the night feels different. It doesn't distort reality. It removes the mask. Without sunlight's distractions, you feel more yourself. Or maybe something more ancient, something watching through your eyes. So when the night speaks, it's not just loneliness or tiredness. It may be the mind remembering it was never just thoughts and skin, that it came from silence, and in silence, it returns, not to frighten you, but to remind you, even in stillness, you are not alone. Something in you is listening back. Imagine yourself standing at a crossroads in a quiet town just before dawn. No traffic, no footsteps, just the still breath of possibility. You could turn left, or right, or wait. Each path leads somewhere, or nowhere. You don't know which, and yet, you must choose. That's the wager. That's the cost of being conscious. You are always risking something. Every decision is a gamble, even the ones that seem small. What to say, what to hide, who to trust, what to pursue. We balance outcomes in our minds, what we might gain, what we might lose. But beneath the surface is something deeper. Most of the time, we're not gambling for money, or fame, or even success. We're gambling for feeling, for the chance to matter, for the illusion of control in a world that rarely guarantees anything. Evolution shaped us to take risks. The hunter who dared the unknown might return with food, or never return at all, but the ones who played it safe faded quietly. So risk became part of our wiring. We bluff in conversations, we fall in love, we chase dreams we may never reach, and sometimes we don't even know what we're betting, just that we have to place the chip. But what are we really trying to win? Some say it's safety, others say it's connection. A few say it's immortality, not of the body, but of meaning. That something we do will ripple outward, remembered, even if only faintly. In that sense, we gamble not just to survive, but to exist. So tonight, as your breath slows and the world softens, notice the quiet wagers you've made, the risks you carry, the hopes hidden beneath the logic. Maybe you've already won something. Maybe the risk was the reward, proof that you were here and that you dared. Start peeling it back, the parts you call you. Memory first, names, places, stories. Then the body, face, voice, gestures. Next, the ego, your pride, your preferences, the internal narrator always whispering, mine. What's left? You might expect emptiness, a void, but something still watches, still is, not thinking, not wanting, just aware. Many spiritual traditions speak of this process, the dissolving of the self. The ego is seen not as essence, but as a costume, useful but temporary. In deep meditation, in illness, even near death, people report the same strange clarity, a presence without identity, as if, underneath all your roles, something quieter waits. Science explores it too, studying ego dissolution, altered states, what happens when the sense of I slips away. The brain changes, I'm disappears, boundaries blur, but the experience often leaves behind a feeling of peace, not fear. So is the self something you are, or just something you wear? If you extinguish it, not in violence, but in stillness. What remains might not be nothing, but the original light, the observer before language, the breath before the name. So tonight, as the day falls away, imagine gently setting aside each layer of identity, not to vanish, but to glimpse what quietly remains when the story of you goes silent. You're given a name before you understand what it means, a language before you can question its shape, a family, a culture, a history that stretches backward into decisions you never made. Over time, it becomes you, or so it seems. But beneath the roles and stories, a quieter question stirs. Is identity a guide or a cage? From childhood, the world mirrors back a version of who you are. Smart, shy, angry, kind. You repeat the labels until they feel natural, until stepping outside them feels like betrayal. But how many of those traits are truly yours? And how many were assigned, absorbed, performed? Even memory plays tricks. Neuroscience shows that we revise our past each time we recall it, shaping it to match the present self-image. Identity is not a fixed archive. It's a constantly edited story. But stories can become prisons. When we define ourselves too tightly, we stop noticing the edges. The roles we play become walls we don't remember building. Spiritual traditions have long warned of this. In Zen, the self is seen as an illusion, useful, but not real. In mystical Christianity and Sufism, identity must be stripped away to touch the divine. Even the Stoics urged detachment from status, title, and ego, not to lose meaning, but to find something more fluid beneath. Yet identity also offers structure, belonging, a thread through time. To abandon it completely risks drifting. So perhaps the answer isn't to erase identity, but to hold it loosely, to wear it like a robe, not a chain, to know that who you are is not the same as who you've been told to be. So, is identity a trap? Only when mistaken for truth, but when seen as a tool, a lens, a language, a map, it can point beyond itself, to something softer, something spacious, a self that changes without fear. N. A breeze once brushed your face on a spring afternoon. You didn't notice it, too distracted. A laugh echoed in a room years ago, full of warmth and light, but you can't quite recall what was said. A glance, a scent, a word on the edge of memory, gone. And yet, something lingers, which raises the question, where do lost moments go? Imagine time not as a line, but as a vast field. Each step you take leaves a faint imprint. Some moments you carry, photographs, stories, vivid memories that replay in quiet hours, but most vanish. Not violently, just unnoticed. A sunset never admired, a stranger's kindness never remembered, a silence too soft to record. Some scientists argue that time is merely a sequence of changing states, that once a moment passes, it ceases to exist, like a wave collapsing when no longer observed. Others suggest the opposite, that all moments still exist, tucked away in a block universe where past, present, and future simply are, layered like pages in a book. But even if physics remains unsure, the emotional truth feels more familiar. Lost moments don't always vanish. Sometimes they echo. You feel nostalgia for something you can't name. A scent brings sudden stillness. A dream delivers the sound of someone's voice you thought you'd forgotten. And in that instant, the moment returns, not fully, not clearly, but present, in some form. Maybe lost moments collect somewhere, not as files or images, but as impressions, subtle fingerprints on the soul, a realm not of memory, but of meaning, of unused time, paused rather than erased. And maybe nothing is truly lost, only waiting to be felt again, when the mind is quiet, when the heart is open, when time lets us listen backward. You arrive with no memory, no map, just a name given to you, a language already in motion, and a sense, faint but steady, that something here feels familiar. Déjà vu, old fears, longings with no source. What if this isn't your first life? Many cultures have quietly believed that souls recycle, not as punishment, not as reward, but as rhythm. A great spiral of return, where each lifetime is a chapter in a longer, forgotten story. You may not recall the others. That's part of the design. To carry full memory would be too heavy. But fragments remain. A stranger who feels like family. A city you've never seen that still feels like home. A talent, untrained, yet already yours. Some call it karma, the weight of past choices echoing forward. Not fate exactly, but momentum. You don't repeat lives, you continue them. The story unfinished, the lesson incomplete. Each birth, a chance to rewrite something. Each death, a pause in the sentence. And still, you forget. Because forgetting allows choice to feel real. Love to feel earned. Pain to be processed anew. You start again, not to be punished, but to see the same sun from a different sky. But sometimes, late at night, you wonder, is this the first time I've asked this question? Have you loved this deeply before? Lost something in the same way again? There is no proof, only feeling. And maybe that's enough, because whether you're on your first story or your 100th, the heart still aches, still hopes, still grows. And maybe that's the point, not to remember the past, but to finish what was once left undone, to live this time as if it's the only one, even if it isn't. Imagine yourself in a quiet hallway lined with doors. Each one is marked with a question you've carried for years. Some are large, heavy, sealed with age. Others hang slightly open. You pause in front of one. Something in you knows the answer lies just beyond it, but your hand doesn't move. Not out of fear of what's behind it, but of what might change if you finally knew. We say we want the truth, but truth can be sharp, final. It takes away the comfort of speculation, the warmth of belief. It doesn't always soothe. Sometimes it strips things bare. A relationship redefined, a memory rewritten, a purpose dissolved. And so, we hesitate. We circle the question. We build stories around it. Sometimes the mystery hurts less than the answer. Psychologists call this motivated ignorance, the subconscious decision not to seek out information that could unsettle us. It's not laziness, it's protection. The brain prioritizes emotional safety, and the truth, however noble, can feel like a threat to identity, to belonging, to hope. In myth and philosophy, this conflict appears often. Eve and the forbidden fruit, Oedipus and the prophecy, Pandora's box. The pattern is the same. Knowledge arrives, and peace departs. But is it the truth that wounds us, or our refusal to grow through it? Some suggest that truth isn't a destination, but a process, that we're not meant to grasp all of it at once, only to approach it gently, to let it reveal itself in layers we're ready to carry. In that way, mystery isn't weakness, it's mercy. So tonight, if something in you stirs with questions long unanswered, let it stir. You don't need to rush to open every door. Some truths arrive not with thunder, but with time, not to undo you, but to slowly let the light in. Look up at the stars, thousands, scattered like frost across the sky. Beautiful, silent, but also distant. They shine without warmth. They burn without concern. And in their stillness, a question rises. Is the universe cold or simply indifferent? It doesn't comfort. It doesn't punish. Storms happen. Galaxies collide. People suffer. Love vanish. And the stars keep burning, unaffected, not out of malice, but because they don't notice. This indifference can feel cruel. We want the cosmos to care, to respond. We imagine fate, signs, reasons, but space offers no reply, only silence so wide it outlasts entire civilizations. But silence isn't always harsh. Sometimes it's just neutral. The universe may not cradle you, but it also doesn't judge. It gave you atoms forged in stars, a body shaped by time, a mind that can wonder at all of this. Maybe that's its quiet gift. Not answers, but the space to ask. Not warmth, but the freedom to build fires against the dark. So is the universe cold? Perhaps. But that cold doesn't have to be cruelty. It can also be calm. A canvas, not a verdict. And tonight, as you drift off beneath that quiet sky, consider this. Maybe meaning was never promised, but your search for it, that's yours. And that, too, is something the stars cannot take away. Across deserts and mountains, cities and islands, something repeats. Different faces, different languages, but the same quiet agreements. Love is sacred. Betrayal wounds. Sacrifice redeems. These stories echo everywhere, from ancient myths to modern films. But who wrote them? And why do we all seem to know them before we can explain them? One answer says evolution. That over generations, emotional patterns shaped behavior that kept groups alive. Those who honored bonds, protected kin, and punished deceit survived. Their instincts became stories. The rules weren't taught at first. They were felt, passed not through words, but through what stirred the heart and what stilled it. But if that's all it is, just wiring, why do these stories feel true even when they hurt us? Why do we return to them again and again, as if pulled by gravity? Another view suggests something deeper. That universal themes may not just be strategies for survival, but reflections of an invisible structure, like the laws of physics, but for the human spirit. Archetypes, as Jung called them. Patterns older than language, surfacing through dream, art, and memory. Not invented, but discovered as, like a melody waiting in the silence. And then, the stranger possibility that these stories were not created by us, but for us. That life itself may be written, not random. That consciousness runs on rules, well-coded scripts unfolding across cultures like branches from the same unseen root. If so, the rules are not just reflections of our choices, but constraints on what we're allowed to imagine. Still, you wonder, if someone did write the rules, could they ever be rewritten? Perhaps not. Perhaps they persist because they resonate, not as laws to obey, but as reminders of what feels most human. Love, betrayal, sacrifice. Not programmed, not imposed, just the quiet structure of meaning, repeating across time, as if we already knew. You want to grow, to evolve, to shed old skins and step into something clearer, truer, more whole. But when it happens, when change truly comes, it rarely feels gentle. Instead, it breaks, unroots, unravels. Why is it that the path to becoming more often feels like becoming less first? Imagine a tree struck by lightning. Branches fall. Bark blackens. But beneath the scar, a deeper resilience begins. Not in defiance, but as a response. Growth doesn't always bloom. It burns. Because to change is to confront the parts of yourself built for a world that no longer exists. In biology, transformation often requires breakdown. Muscles tear to grow stronger. Forests burn to make way for new life. Even the stars collapse before they scatter elements that build planets and people. Destruction is not the opposite of creation. It is its condition. Psychologically, the same holds. Awakening can shatter illusions we depended on. Old beliefs, roles, relationships, they fracture under pressure. And in the moment, it feels like failure, like loss. But underneath is something vital. Rearrangement. Your mind making space for truth where comfort used to live. We resist this, naturally. The ego clings to familiarity, but real change asks for surrender, not polishing what exists, but letting part of it die. And death, even symbolic, feels violent, because it is. A rupture in continuity, a forced confrontation with what no longer fits. But within that pain is something sacred, a doorway. A clearing, a silence where new direction begins. So maybe change isn't cruel, maybe it's just honest. It doesn't wait for readiness. It doesn't whisper. It arrives as collapse, not to break you, but to show what was never solid to begin with. And from that rubble, something new breathes, something that couldn't exist any other way. You speak, you laugh, you move through the day in a body that feels like yours. But underneath the practiced motions, the familiar voice, the daily rhythm, something else stirs, something quieter, older, a version of you not yet spoken aloud. What part of you is hidden? Not from the world, but from yourself. There are memories you've buried so deeply they no longer feel like memory. Reactions you can't explain, fears with no visible cause, longings that rise like waves in moments you thought were still. These aren't accidents, they're signals. The mind, in its elegance, hides things to protect you. It buries pain in muscle, tucks away grief behind habits. It folds entire stories into posture, breath, and tone. But even buried, they do not rest. They whisper through tension, through silence, through dreams. Some parts of you were silenced before they could speak, a truth swallowed in childhood, a wildness tamed too early, an instinct denied so often it now wears politeness like armor. And then there are the gifts, quiet abilities you've never named, intuitions you dismiss, joys you postpone, all waiting beneath the surface, untouched not by shame, but by inattention. Psychologists call it the shadow. Mystics call it the soul's underside. But maybe it's just the rest of you, the full story still unfolding. So ask yourself gently, what have I hidden so well I forgot it was mine? And if you listen, at the edge of thought, beneath the noise, you might feel it. A pulse, a memory, a voice not demanding to be heard but waiting to be welcomed home, not to frighten you, but to remind you that you are more than what you've shown. Imagine yourself walking at night through a quiet neighborhood. The windows are dark, the air is still, but something hums beneath the silence, a faint rhythm, like a thought just outside hearing. You glance at the same streetlight you passed yesterday, exactly at 11:11. You feel a strange sense of déjà vu, not dramatic, just notable, like you've stepped into a pattern and the pattern is watching back. Throughout time, people have spoken of signs, symbols appearing at just the right moment, numbers repeating, dreams that echo real life, sensations that don't seem to come from inside the self. We dismiss them as coincidence, or call them superstition. But still, we notice. We feel them, not as facts, but as nudges. Psychologists often explain this through pattern recognition. The mind seeks meaning, even in randomness. We give significance to what's already meaningful to us, filtering out the rest. If you've been thinking about change, every door feels like a message. If you're in love, every song becomes a mirror. But that doesn't make it false. It makes it personal. Some researchers go further. They've explored whether consciousness might be more than self-contained, that subtle fields, electromagnetic, quantum, even informational, could interact with awareness in ways we don't yet understand. Not signals from a distant control panel, but shared resonance, a kind of tuning, like your mind is a radio, and something unknown is faintly broadcasting. Or maybe these signals aren't external at all. Maybe they're you, speaking from deeper layers. Your subconscious, your memory, your intuition, forming patterns to guide you gently, not commands, but invitations, not predictions, but possibilities. So tonight, as your body softens and the world quiets, notice what lingers. A word, a number, a dream. You don't have to interpret it. Just receive it. Maybe it means nothing, or maybe it's the universe in conversation, speaking in a language only you were meant to hear. You imagine cages as visible things, walls, routines, fears you can name. But what if the real prison is harder to see, not built from habit or hesitation, but from matter, from time, from the very logic that shapes your world? You wake, you sleep, you age. You think in sequence, move through space, bound always to before and after. Even your thoughts obey invisible rules, cause, effect, language. There are boundaries you've never questioned because you were born inside them. What if this, your entire experience, is the cage? Some philosophies suggest consciousness didn't begin here, but was confined here, folded into a body, filtered through senses, tied to time. You live in a story that only flows one way, in a body that must eat, must rest, must die. It feels normal, but so does any long captivity. And yet, within the walls, you dream of more. You imagine timelessness. You question rules. You wonder what lies beyond. That restlessness, that sense of something beyond reach, may be the echo of freedom you can't remember, but still crave. Maybe the cage isn't punishment. Maybe it's a lesson, or a mirror, or maybe it's just where you are right now. But tonight, as the world softens, ask quietly, what if this isn't all there is? And what if your longing to escape isn't failure, but the first key in your hand? We tend to think in lines, one thing after another, cause, then effect. A first breath, a first light. Every story needs a beginning, we're told, and so we imagine the universe itself must have one, a moment when everything began. But trace that line far enough back, and something strange happens. The beginning becomes hard to find. The Big Bang is often called the origin, not just of stars and planets, but of time and space themselves. Before it, there was no before, no ticking clock, no place to stand, just a point, infinitely dense, impossibly small, then sudden expansion. But even this explanation trembles at the edge of understanding. What caused the cause? What sparked the spark? Religious traditions offer their own answers. A divine will, a spoken word, an eternal mind that gave birth to time. But even these raise the same question. Where did that begin? If everything comes from something, where does the first something come from? Some philosophers argue there never was a true origin point, only an illusion created by our minds craving narrative. That time is not linear, but looped or layered or infinite in both directions. Others suggest beginnings aren't real at all, just transitions we label to make sense of continuity. The way a river begins at a spring, but the water came from somewhere else. And in mystical thought, the question itself dissolves. The origin isn't a place in the past, but a presence, always here, a stillness beneath change. Not the first moment, but the ever-present source. So, what is the origin point? Maybe it's not something defined, but something we're already in. Not the first word of the story, but the page itself. Waiting, blank, ready for the next line to begin. You wake up. The light feels familiar. The sound of the kettle, the way the street bends, the exact moment someone finishes your sentence, it all echoes. Not just familiar, but predicted. You've never lived this day before, and yet some quiet part of you remembers, as if this isn't the first time. So you wonder, have I done this before? Imagine life not as a line, but as a loop, a spiral, a saved file on a system you can't see. Each time you pass through, small changes ripple, but the core remains. The same arguments, the same choices, the same dreams, slightly out of reach. You grow, you fall, you forget. And still, some moments arrive too precisely, too rehearsed, to feel entirely new. Science has no firm answers for this sensation. Déjà vu, they say, may be a neurological hiccup, your brain confusing present input for memory, a circuit misfiring, a glitch in perception. But the feeling it leaves behind lingers. Not just confusion, but recognition. Not, I've seen this, but I've been this. Ancient traditions offer a different view. The wheel of samsara, reincarnation, cycles of forgetting and remembering, each life a re-entry point to a larger pattern. Some believe the soul repeats not out of punishment, but refinement, as if you are learning a lesson hidden between the moments. And when it's finally understood, the loop breaks. But what if the loop is psychological, emotional? Repetition not in time, but in self. The same choices dressed in different days, a pattern you haven't yet interrupted. And the question is, not have you done this before, but will you keep doing it? Or maybe, just maybe, your life is not repeating, but remembering itself. Like a dream you forgot, slowly surfacing. A trace from a saved file, yours, again and again, until something changes, or you do. We often speak of purpose as creation, building, achieving, leaving a mark behind. But what if the point of life isn't to make something new, but to fix something old? Not a flaw in the world, not a failure in others, but something quieter, something inside, a fracture you no longer remember making. You arrive here with no memory of what came before, but the ache is still there. In certain moments, unexplained guilt, sudden sadness, a tenderness toward strangers, you feel it, like an old injury that throbs with the weather, a thread that pulls without revealing where it leads. What if this life isn't your first attempt? Maybe it's a return, a continuation, not to repeat mistakes, but to repair them, not as punishment, but as mercy. A second chance that doesn't come with instructions, just a feeling, a sense that something must be made right. Though you may never know what, you find yourself drawn to certain people, certain places, certain patterns, not by accident, but as if some deep part of you recognizes the terrain, as if the story began long before this page. And maybe that's why the most meaningful moments often come not from achievement, but from mending, apologizing when you don't have to, holding space for someone else's pain, forgiving yourself for things you never meant to carry. Creation is loud, repair is quiet. But perhaps the quiet work is what matters most. So, if you feel lost, incomplete, uncertain of what you're meant to do, maybe you're not here to build something that can be seen. Maybe you're here to heal something that can't, something that lived and broke long before this name, this body, this now. And if so, then every gentle act may be a stitch in the soul. Imagine yourself at the edge of an ancient staircase carved into a mountain. The steps stretch both upward and downward, disappearing into mist. You don't know which direction you came from. You only know you're moving. Every step feels like progress. But what if it isn't? What if you're descending, slowly, gracefully, mistaking the fall for flight? We're taught that evolution moves upward, that we're advancing, technologically, intellectually, socially, more connected, more capable. But ancient myths tell another story, of golden ages lost, of civilizations that once knew more, not less, of a fall not from ignorance, but from something sacred, a memory too deep to verify, but too persistent to ignore. Some philosophers have called this the decline of being, the idea that existence once pulsed with more meaning, and that our modern world, for all its brilliance, drifts further from something essential, a wholeness, a clarity, not in science, but in spirit. In the rhythm of life, we may have forgotten how to hear. Yet in biology, evolution has no goal. It doesn't climb. It adapts. Sometimes simplicity wins. Sometimes loss is survival. Wings become arms. Eyes go blind in caves. Change isn't always ascension. Sometimes it's retreat. Still, the question lingers, not just in the world, but within. Are we growing or fading? Are we expanding into complexity or unraveling from something purer? And if we are falling, is it necessarily tragic or is it transformation? So tonight, let the staircase blur. Let the direction dissolve. Whether you're rising or descending, you're still moving. And maybe, just maybe, the descent is a return, not a failure, but a spiral. A quiet way back to something once known, now remembered. Most of the time, you assume your thoughts are yours. You speak them in your mind's voice. They appear in familiar patterns. But now and then, a thought arrives suddenly, uninvited, too perfect, too strange. And you wonder, did I create that? Some thoughts feel like intrusions. Others feel like revelations. They rise before you can trace where they came from. Not chosen, just there, like echoes from a room you didn't realize you were standing in. Neuroscience says thoughts are patterns, chemical, electrical, neurons firing in ways shaped by memory, habit, environment. But that doesn't explain the thoughts that surprise you, the ones that don't feel summoned but delivered. Ancient traditions spoke of inspiration as something external, muses, spirits, collective memory. Some modern thinkers suggest consciousness may be more like a radio receiver than a generator. Your brain tunes in, but doesn't always compose. So, who's thinking when you're not? And when a thought enters, perfectly timed, perfectly formed, are you the author or the witness? Maybe identity isn't built from the thoughts you have, but from the ones you choose to follow. You may not control what arrives, but you decide what stays. And tonight, as your mind quiets, notice the thoughts that float through. Not to claim them, just to observe. You are not every voice in your head. You are the silence that listens. Before light, before space, before time, what was there? Not darkness, not silence. Those are still things. The question goes deeper. Why is there anything at all? Why not? Nothing. It's the question behind all others. Every star, every cell, every passing thought, all of it depends on the fact that something exists. But existence itself offers no explanation. It simply is. And the more we ask, the more reality feels like an answer without a question. Science can describe how things came to be, the Big Bang, particle formation, cosmic inflation, but it starts from a seed already planted. Physics doesn't explain why there is a universe to begin with, only how it unfolds once it begins. As Stephen Hawking once asked, what breathes fire into the equations? Some philosophers argue that nothingness is unstable, that perhaps existence is inevitable, that something must arise because nothingness, by its nature, cannot hold. But that too is a story we write after the fact. Others say it's simply a brute fact. The universe just is. No reason, no cause, no before. And yet, this feels incomplete. There's an intuitive tension in imagining true nothing. No matter, no energy, no rules, not even emptiness, just absence, pure non-being. And from that, somehow, us. Religious traditions offer different views. Some say the divine is existence itself, being as an eternal source. Others describe creation as an act of love, or will, or necessity. But even then, we ask, why should such a source exist in the first place? Perhaps the question persists because it can't be answered with thought, because the moment you ask it, you're already inside the something. The questioner is proof the question matters. So why is there something instead of nothing? Maybe not to be solved, but to be wondered. Maybe the answer is the wonder itself, the quiet awe of noticing that you are, and that the world is here, when it just as easily might not have been. You tell stories about who you are. You collect memories, habits, preferences, even flaws, like items on a shelf labeled me. But those stories shift. The roles change. You outgrow certain truths. You forget key moments. You adapt. You perform. And in quiet moments, the question arrives again. Who am I really? Can you ever know yourself? Imagine looking at your reflection, not in a mirror, but in a slow-moving river. What you see is real, but it bends with the current. The image flickers, ripples, changes shape depending on light and angle. You're there, but not fixed, not final. Philosophers have long circled this puzzle. Heraclitus wrote, "You cannot step into the same river twice, because both the river and the self are always changing." David Hume doubted the existence of a core identity at all, claiming that the self is just a bundle of perceptions, forever in flux. Neuroscience echoes this unease. The brain rebuilds itself constantly. Memory is unreliable. Personality can shift after trauma, age, or experience. Even your body renews itself, cell by cell. And yet, through it all, there's the sense of being you, a continuous thread, hard to define but impossible to deny. Some say that knowing yourself isn't a destination, but a process. a practice. You observe your thoughts, you notice your patterns, you ask hard questions, and change in the asking. But the more you look, the more you realize there is no solid center, only awareness. And perhaps that's the answer, that the true you isn't a set of traits, but the watcher behind them. The part that sees the pretending, the forgetting, the becoming. The quiet presence behind the shifting masks. Not a name, not a role, just this. The one who wonders if they can ever be known. We think of light as truth. It reveals. It shows us the world. We trust what we see. But light, like memory, like time, can bend. Starlight travels for millions of years, only to be pulled off course by gravity. A distant sun might not be where it seems. It may not even still exist. You're seeing a ghost, gently painted by delayed photons. And yet, it looks so real. Even here, on Earth, light is no better behaved. A stick in water looks broken. A mirage shimmers on hot pavement, whispering false lakes into your vision. The sky itself lies, blue not because of color, but because of scattering. The sun seems to set, but it's the earth that turns. And still, you trust your eyes. Colors? They don't exist in the world. They live in the mind. Light bounces, frequencies shift, and your brain interprets. But that interpretation can be wrong. Optical illusions reveal the trick. Shadow becomes shape. Stillness seems to move. Straight lines bend. If even light, the great revealer, can be deceived, what can we trust? Perhaps not the image, but the awareness behind it. The part of you that notices the lie, that feels the shift, the strangeness, the inconsistency. A deeper seeing, not of forms, but of patterns. And maybe the lesson isn't to mistrust the world, but to approach it with humility. To know that even reality wears costumes, that even the truest beam of light must pass through filters, layers, lenses, just like truth, just like thought. So yes, light can be lied to. It can be bent, blurred, delayed, confused, but still, it shines. And maybe that's what matters, not perfection, but persistence. The quiet, constant attempt to illuminate, even if the image is never quite complete. Imagine yourself inside a quiet library built entirely from glass. Every wall reflects your image. Every surface feels cold but clear. You walk between rows of neatly ordered shelves, volumes of rules, categories, conclusions. Everything here makes sense. And yet, you feel something missing. A warmth, a presence, a knowing that can't be indexed or explained. Logic is the structure we build to understand the world. It defines cause and effect. It protects us from chaos. In philosophy, logic is sacred, the foundation of clarity, argument, truth. In science, it's how we measure progress. It demands consistency, precision, proof. And for that, it's invaluable. But logic has limits. It cannot describe beauty. It cannot measure grief. It cannot tell you why a familiar voice can break your composure, or why you trust someone without knowing why. Logic may explain what things are, but it struggles with why they matter. Even in mathematics, where logic reigns, there are boundaries. Gödel's incompleteness theorems proved that within any system of logic, there are truths that cannot be proven, truths that exist but cannot be reached by logic alone. And what about instinct, emotion, the gut feeling that warns before thought forms? Neuroscience shows that our decisions often begin before we're aware of them. Logic arrives late, offering explanations after the choice is made. So maybe logic isn't the highest path to truth. Maybe it's a tool, powerful but incomplete. A lantern in the dark, useful but narrow. Beyond its reach lies something softer, something that pulses in art, in memory, in dream. Not less real, just less measurable. So tonight, if your thoughts refuse to line up neatly, if your feelings contradict the facts, don't worry. Not all truths arrive wrapped in reason. Some are meant to be felt first, and trusted, even if they never quite explain themselves. Science gives answers, testable, repeatable, precise. It maps the stars, decodes DNA, predicts the tide. But when grief breaks you open, or wonder catches you breathless beneath the sky, no formula steps in. Some truths don't submit to measurement. You can scan the brain during love, but not define what makes it sacred. You can explain how tears form, but not why certain memories unlock them. And when someone speaks of spiritual awakening, there's no equation for the shift they feel, only language that points towards something larger. This isn't a failure of science. It's simply that science studies the outside of things. It tells you how the orchestra works, but not why the music moves you. There's a depth to lived experience that resists dissection. The ache of longing, the stillness of peace, the eerie sense that you've been here before. You can't replicate these things in a lab, and yet they shape your life more than gravity ever will. Maybe reality isn't only what can be proven, but also what can be felt. So tonight, if logic runs dry, let it. Not everything real wears a label. Some truths arrive quietly, wrapped not in data, but in meaning. And maybe the most honest part of you isn't the one searching for proof, but the one willing to stand in the mystery and still say yes. You could have been born at any point in the vast sweep of time, in a quiet stone village centuries ago, or on a distant future world not yet imagined. But instead, you exist now, in this exact sliver of history, in this particular body, with this set of memories, losses, and names. Why? Biologically, it's coincidence, a lineage of choices, accidents, and inheritances. Your ancestors survived plagues, wars, and silence. One turn different, and you wouldn't be here, but chance, while explanatory, doesn't satisfy. The timing feels too specific, too placed. Why this particular moment? Some say consciousness is not a stream, but a spark. That now is the only point where awareness can exist. The past is memory, the future, imagination. But this is where being happens. Perhaps you exist now because that's the only time anything can exist at all. Now is the seat of reality. And it's always now. Others see something stranger, that consciousness doesn't randomly land in time, but loops through it. That this life, this moment, might be part of a cycle, repeating or branching, chosen not by accident, but by resonance. You appear now because something in this time reflects what you needed to experience, or resolve, or learn. A form of temporal gravity pulling you toward this version of existence. And then there's the possibility that now is simply where your thread intersects with the world's unfolding shape, a point of crossing between infinite pasts and countless futures. You're here, not to know why, but to notice, to observe this precise configuration of sky, thought, and breath. So why do you exist now? Maybe there is no answer, or maybe the answer is the question itself, gently drawing your attention to the strangeness of being. Not anywhere, not any time, but here, in this flicker, in this exact, impossible now. You search for meaning, in work, in love, in moments, quiet or chaotic. You reach for answers, in books, in silence, in others' eyes. But what if life was never meant to answer anything? What if it is the question? One long, slow unfolding of something that cannot be spoken, only lived. Imagine walking through a corridor with no end, each door offering a glimpse, but not the whole. You choose, you move, you change. And each choice isn't a solution, but a shape the question takes. What if joy is not the reward, but a clue? What if pain isn't failure, but punctuation? A pause in the inquiry? Ancient traditions hint at this. In Zen, the koan, a riddle that has no answer, is not meant to be solved, but experienced, lived with, broken open by presence. Likewise, the mystics of many faiths speak of life not as a riddle to decode, but as a divine echo, something asking itself through every sunrise, every breath, every goodbye. Even science, for all its logic, offers no final answer. It explains how, but never why. Why existence? Why awareness? Why this moment, this body, this mind that wanders in the dark? Perhaps asking is the purpose, to live in the question fully without rushing to fill it, to sit in the uncertainty and feel the weight of being a conscious creature in a silent universe. And perhaps that is the deepest form of understanding, not knowing, but being, the inquiry. So maybe you are not the answer to life's mystery. Maybe you are the mystery, asking itself in human form. A single, fragile, luminous question unfolding through time. You wake, you move through the day, you sleep, and again, over and over, the same meals, the same thoughts, the same longings that return, even when you thought they were finished. Life unfolds not in straight lines, but in loops. Is that failure, or is it design? We're taught to chase newness, to seek forward motion, but the truth is quieter. We return to places, to people, to patterns. A familiar song makes you feel whole. A memory, revisited, reveals something new. Maybe repetition isn't a flaw in the system, but the shape of the system itself. Nature repeats. The seasons turn in circles. Tides pull and release. Trees drop their leaves, only to bloom again. The heart beats in rhythm. The breath returns, again and again, to center. Why should the soul be different? Maybe the cycle is the teaching. In myth and ritual, repetition holds power. A chant spoken once is sound. Spoken 100 times, it becomes truth. A lesson learned once is fragile. Lived many times, it becomes you. Even grief returns in waves, not to torment, but to be felt more deeply. Yes. Each pass through the same emotion carves something open, something honest, not because you are broken, but because you are being shown what matters. So, is repetition the answer? Maybe not in words, but in rhythm, in the soft, slow turning of your life around some quiet axis, not toward escape, but understanding. And if it feels like you've been here before, maybe you have, but this time, you notice more. And maybe that's the point, not to break the cycle, but to live it so fully, so consciously, that the loop becomes the lesson, and the lesson becomes the way home. Imagine yourself waking in a place you don't remember entering. The ground beneath you is soft, like moss or memory. The sky above has no sun, but still it glows. You don't know how you got here, but you feel, deeply, that you're meant to be here. That your presence isn't an accident, but an arrival. Most lives unfold without a clear beginning. We're born into motion, into names and roles and systems already moving. We're told it's all chance, DNA, probability, biology, a cosmic lottery with no ticket and no caller. But still, the question lingers in quiet hearts. Was I sent here? And if so, by what? Religious traditions speak of missions, souls assigned, lessons to learn. Some say you chose this life. Others say you were chosen. Philosophers have long wondered whether there's a source behind intention, some intelligence, pattern, or consciousness vast enough to place pieces without revealing the board. But even science leaves gaps. The odds of you existing, your exact body, your exact time, are so impossibly small they border on the miraculous. So the idea that you're meant, that you're not random, feels less like fantasy and more like a quiet logic just beyond the edge of speech. Maybe you were sent by evolution, an echo of survival in motion, or by memory, an ancient lineage whispering forward, or maybe the sender isn't outside you, but is you, a deeper self, a version that remembers something you've forgotten, a presence moving you towards something without telling you why. So tonight, if you feel aimless or lost, pause, breathe. You don't need to know the sender. You don't even need to know the message. Just trust that your being here means something, and that whoever, or whatever, sent you with care. You look out at the stars and feel small, dust, floating in the vast. But what if you're not just in the universe? What if you are the universe, looking back at itself? Every atom in your body was once forged in a star. Your bones, your blood, your breath, all recycled stardust, organized for a moment into awareness. You are not separate from the cosmos. You're its most delicate arrangement. And somehow, you know you exist. That knowing is rare. Planets don't reflect. Oceans don't ask questions. But you, fragile, temporary, wondering, carry a mirror in your mind. You don't just see beauty. You feel it. You don't just live. You witness life happening. Some call this consciousness. Others call it illusion. But either way, it's the one thing that makes you more than particles in motion. It's the soft voice inside saying, I am. And if that voice emerged from the universe, then it belongs to it. So maybe the stars don't need eyes because yours are enough. Maybe the universe doesn't speak because your thoughts are its voice, brief, flickering, imperfect, but real. And tonight, as your body rests and your mind drifts outward, consider this. What if you are not here to observe the universe, but so the universe can finally observe itself? You search without knowing exactly what you seek, through books, through silence, through the weight of questions that never quite resolve. Something in you leans toward an answer, not just fact, but truth. The kind that makes everything make sense, the kind that ends the search. But every time you get close, the ground shifts. Certainty becomes perspective. Proof becomes interpretation. Even the self that's asking is never quite the same. So you wonder, will I ever truly know the truth? Philosophers have wrestled with this for centuries. Plato imagined a world beyond appearances, pure forms, seen only by the mind, never the eyes. Descartes doubted everything until he arrived at a single certainty, that he was doubting. Even then, truth seemed small, solitary, and surrounded by fog. Science tries to get closer by narrowing the gap between what is and what is known. But even there, uncertainty lingers. Quantum physics tells us the more precisely we measure one thing, the less we can know about another. Observation itself becomes part of the equation. Truth, it seems, is not just hidden, it's entangled. Spiritual paths speak of revelation, of insight that dissolves the self and merges it with something greater. But even these moments are wrapped in metaphor, in language borrowed from silence. You may feel truth, but the moment you try to hold it, it slips into symbol. So maybe truth isn't a destination. Maybe it's not even a single thing. Maybe it's the ache itself, the quiet longing to understand, to feel aligned with something deeper. Maybe that is the most honest part of you. Will you ever know the truth? Maybe not in this life, maybe not in the next, but the yearning, the leaning toward it, the reaching out in the dark, that might be the truth, not the answer but the pull, a compass with no map, but a direction you feel in your bones.